Chapter 1. The inciting incident grand hall of Ashburn Manor shimmered under a constellation of crystal chandeliers. Their light dancing across polished marble floors and reflecting in the jeweled collars of the evening's guests. It was the kind of gathering that every society newspaper would covet. Dukes and duchesses, artists and financiers, all drawn together by the benevolent patronage of Lord and Lady Ashburn. Yet, even as the string quartet began its lilting prelude, a subtle tension threaded through the assembly, an undercurrent of whispered rivalries and carefully concealed debts stopped at the far end of the hall. In a niche illuminated by a single candelabra, Hercule Poirot surveyed the scene with his trademark poise. His small moustache twitched ever so slightly, a sure sign that his little grey cells were already at work. Clad in a perfectly tailored evening coat, he contrasted sharply with the more ostentatious attire of several guests, whose flamboyant jewellery and loud colours betrayed an eagerness to impress or to distract. Beside him stood Captain Arthur Hastings, his friend and chronicler, craning his neck to catch every detail. "Remarkable display," Poirot murmured, his voice smooth yet insistent. "But do you not sense, Hastings, that beneath this veneer of elegance lies something more portentous?" Hastings frowned. "You mean someone here is up to no good?" "Exactament. In my experience, such gatherings are rarely without a hidden purpose, and tonight, I suspect, one such purpose may turn quite sinister." They had scarcely exchanged another word when a sudden hush rippled through the crowd. The quartet's music faltered, and every eye swung toward the library doors at the north end of the hall, now thrown wide by an urgent hand. Lady Ashburn herself stood there, her powdered face ashen, fingers trembling against the mahogany frame. "My husband," she gasped. He's been taken." Gasps and murmurs erupted. Poirot stepped forward, small black cane in hand, his expression inscrutable yet alert. With the gentle authority of a man accustomed to command attention, he raised his voice just enough to cut through the confusion. "Mon du pray calm yourselves, madam. Tell me exactly what has occurred." Lady Ashburn's eyes filled with tears. "We were to toast our good fortune, our silver anniversary. Do you recall when Lord Ashburn excused himself for a moment to retrieve a special gift? It was to be unveiled here, in front of everyone. But when I sought him in his private study mere minutes ago, the room was empty. The desk, however," her voice faltered as she pointed inside, "on the blotter, I found this." From her embroidered purse, she produced a small card, its parchment pale and unassuming. Hastings stepped closer to look. Faintly visible under the lamplight were 2 lines of looping script, written in what appeared to be invisible ink and rendered visible by a single drop of lemon juice. Someone had apparently splattered across the page. Poirot's keen eyes narrowed as he recognized the significance. "Invisible ink," he said softly, sliding the card into a protective sleeve. A clue, perhaps, or a threat." He turned toward the assembled guests, now clustering at the library threshold. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you will forgive me, I must request that no one leave this room. In fact, I should be obliged if you would remain here in the hall until the matter has been resolved." The crowd reacted with a mixture of indignation and curiosity. Many had personal stakes in the evening's proceedings, but Poirot's unflappable demeanour and the weight of his reputation as an investigative genius quelled most protests. Only Lady Chantal, a famed Parisian socialite, dared to challenge him outright. "Surely you cannot hold us hostage over a mere card," she said, arching a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "If Lord Ashburn is missing, we should form a search party." "Are you telling us he's been kidnapped?" "Possible," Poirot replied, stepping aside to reveal the study's half-open door. "Or perhaps something more intricate and elaborate, disappearance staged to divert attention from her." Crime yet to be discovered. He paused, glancing back at Lady Chantal. In any case, mademoiselle, time is of the essence. Tell me, did any one of you observe someone entering or leaving this wing since the announcement of tonight? Toast, a hush fell. A dozen pairs of eyes flickered in the chandelier light, some downcast, some defiant. Poirot's attention shifted to a young barrister, Mr. Julian Byrne, whose attire was impeccable, but whose pallor betrayed his anxiety. Byrne cleared his throat. Well, I did see Mr. Fairfax loitering near the gallery corridor, he stammered. But I assumed he was admiring the paintings. Mr. Fairfax, Poirot asked, his moustache quivering. Madame Fairfax, do you mean? He turned to a statuesque woman in emerald silk whose face remained impassive. Madam, was it you? Then Mrs. Fairfax inclined her head slowly. I happened to be en route to the billiard room when I paused to admire the recent acquisition from Tangier. I saw no one of interest save Mr. Byrne, whom I found myself passing. Byrne flushed. I was merely walking toward the gallery. I did not linger. Poirot made a soft humming sound. Indeed, and yet, you were the only person observed near the gallery corridor precisely between the hall and the study at the critical interval of Lord Ashburn's disappearance. He turned to Lady Ashburn. Madam, pray show me exactly where. You left the door. Under Poirot's guidance, Lady Ashburn led him into the study. The room was elegant, but unremarkable. A heavy walnut desk, shelves of leather-bound volumes. A faint scent of cognac lingering in the air. Poirot crouched to inspect the floor, then rose to examine the desk surface, running a gloved finger along the edge. He whispered, pointing at a slight smudge on the polished wood. A single fingerprint, smudged rather than crisp. Someone wiped it deliberately, but imperfectly. And here, he tapped the blotter where the invisible ink card had lain. The outline of a small box. Lord Ashburn's gift. No doubt, someone removed it before it could be presented. The assembled guests pressed forward, their faces a gallery of suspicion and dread. Poirot stood, straightening his coat, and addressed them, ladies and gentlemen. I fear this is no ordinary disturbance. We have at least one missing gentleman, a stolen object, and a clue written in invisible ink. The game is afoot. Nests pause. A thrill of apprehension rippled through the crowd. The air seemed to crackle with anticipation and, for Poirot, this was merely the beginning. The first spark of mystery had been ignited, and already the threads were tangled beyond ordinary comprehension. But in due course, with his little grey cells fully engaged, Poirot would untangle every knot and reveal the hidden design at the heart of Ashburn Manor. Chapter 2. The first clue as a subdued murmur cascaded through the grand hall as the guests exchanged uneasy glances. The quartet, having regained its composure, resumed its melody, though the music now sounded tentative, as if uncertain whether to proceed. Poirot lingered at the study's threshold. Baton then, fingers clasped behind his back, Hastings hovered. Nearby, notebook in hand, ready to record every nuance of his companion's observations. Let us return to the scene. Hastings, Poirot announced softly, stepping into the library. We commence our investigation in earnest. He motioned toward the center of the room, where a small round table stood cleared of refreshments, its marble surface gleaming. The invisible ink card had been set there, now sealed within a protective envelope. Lady Ashburn, still pale and trembling, approached. This is where I found it, she whispered, indicating the blotter on the desk. I only touched it to see what it was. Her voice quivered. Poirot inclined his head. Madam, thank you. He crouched, examining the embossed leather blotter and the subtle indentation left by the box that once rested there. Observe, Hastings, he murmured. The impression is shallow, suggesting something quite light. A small case, perhaps. But note the direction of the indent. Toward the right-hand side, the object was removed in haste. Rather than placed carefully, Hastings peered closely. "Do you think it was taken after Lord Ashburn vanished?" "Precisely. The perpetrator likely removed the gift first, either to conceal it or because it holds the key to the entire affair." Poirot rose and crossed to the window, opening the heavy velvet drape. A shaft of moonlight illuminated a faint scuff on the polished floorboards by the sill. And here, Hastings. "We have further evidence." Hastings crouched to inspect. Shoe scuff. But it's smudged. Hard to tell size or pattern. Poirot tapped the wood gently. This scuff lies at an angle inconsistent with movement out of the room. It suggests someone approached the window, perhaps to peer inside or to peer out. Yet no one has reported suspicious activity on the terrace below. A murmur rose among the assembled witnesses outside the library. Two maids exchanged startled looks. The butler, Mr. Barnaby, cleared his throat and stepped forward. "Sir," Barnaby said, voice measured, "I thought proper to mention that the terrace doors were all locked when I made my rounds earlier. This evening, it is only now that I notice one latch is slightly ajar, and you did not open it." Poirot inquired, raising a slender eyebrow. Barnaby shook his head. "No, monsieur, I would not presume." Poirot nodded, then returned to the desk. He slipped on a pair of white gloves and reached for Lady Ashburn's card with delicate care. He peeled back the envelope and revealed the parchment. The 2 lines of luminescent stains formed letters that read, "The truth is veiled by those who trust. Seek the shimmer behind the smile." Poirot read aloud, his voice calm yet charged with intensity. "Seek the shimmer behind the smile. The riddle nests pause. The invisible ink note warns us that one of these finely attired individuals, one who presents a pleasant coup, Denance harbours this night a secret that shines only when exposed." Lady Chantal stepped forward, her Parisian poise unruffled. "Monsieur Poirot, this sounds very dramatic, but what does shimmer refer to? Jury." A reflection. Poirot's dark eyes flickered with amusement. "Excellent question. Mademoiselle, a shimmer need not be literal. It may denote duplicity, an outward gleam concealing a darker truth. But let us not become lost in metaphor. We continue our tangible examination." He motioned to the blotter. "Hastings, observe the blotter's surface. See here, the acid used for the invisible ink has left a slight watermark beyond the note. Itself, it forms an impression, as though something was placed upon it during the writing. What object might produce such a shape?" Hastings peered at the pattern, tracing its outline. "A locket, perhaps, or a slender book, or an ink bottle." Poirot murmured, "Note the circular depression at the base, and the narrower neck imprint above. Someone used a glass or metal flask to write this note and then laid it atop." The blotter. He straightened and turned toward the assembled guests. "I should be obliged if your servants would bring anything resembling a writing instrument or flask from this room. Do you recall seeing a particular ink bottle?" "Perhaps on Lord Ashburn's desk earlier this evening." Mrs. Fairfax raised a gloved hand. "There was a crystal inkwell gift from Tangier in the corner near the desk. It seems to be missing now." Poirot exclaimed, his mustache twitching. "Precisely. Someone has removed more than one item from this study. The gift, the ink bottle, and, of course, Lord Ashburn himself. The question is why? What connects the flask to the gift?" A soft footstep drew their attention. Inspector Jupp, summoned from the local constabulary, entered the room. He wore a look of mild frustration. "Poirot, we've searched the grounds and questioned the staff. No sign of Lord Ashburn outside." His car remains in the stable courtyard, engine cold. Whatever occurred must have happened indoors. Poirot nodded gravely. Merci, Jap, your men have done admirably. Now, if you would conduct a thorough search of the gallery corridor and the billiard room, any place a man might hide or be concealed, while I inspect these immediate premises for further evidence. Jap saluted at once as Jap departed. Poirot turned to Hastings. The missing ink bottle and gift box lead me to suspect that our culprit is adept in chemical matters, one who understands pH reactions and the use of invisible inks. Consider whom the suspect possesses that knowledge. Hastings glanced at the circle of faces. Let us see. Mr. Julian Byrne, the barrister unlikely. Mrs. Fairfax is a socialite. Lady Chantal, an artist, but I see no easels in her carriage. Who else? Poirot's gaze settled on Dr. Edwin Mallory, the family physician, a quiet man whose stethoscope peeped from beneath his waistcoat. Mallory stood just behind Lady Ashburn. Arms folded, Dr. Mallory managed Lady Ashburn's health for many years, Poirot said. A learned man in the sciences, accustomed to handling chemicals. He may know the properties of lemon juice and invisible inks. The doctor's calm visage betrayed no emotion. Monsieur Poirot, you honor me with mention, but I assure you, my visit this evening was purely social. I would never engage in such theatrics. Of course, Poirot replied politely. Yet we must follow the evidence, wherever it leads. Additionally, consider the scarf near the window. If our culprit attempted to use the terrace as an escape, they would have been visible to staff below. More likely, the window served as vantage rather than egress. Someone watched the gathering, collected information, and then slipped back within. He straightened and addressed the room, voice carrying authority. Madam, monsieur, I require your attention for the next stage. I shall recreate the sequence of Lord Ashburn's exit from the hall. Pray state precisely where you stood. At the moment Lady Ashburn summoned help, one by one, the guests recounted their positions. Lady Chantal near the punch bowl, Dr. Mallory at Lady Ashburn's side, Mr. Byrne inspecting the portrait of Lady Victoria Ashburn, and several others, each alibi noted with deliberate care by Hastings. Poirot listened, eyes always sharp, calculating the timings against the stroke of the grandfather clock just beyond the library doors. When the last account was given, Poirot glanced at Hastings. The first clues are thus assembled, vanished. Host, his stolen gift, an ink bottle taken, an invisible ink note bearing a cryptic warning, and an imprint of haste. A psychological puzzle indeed, one that plays upon fear and surprise. But we have yet to uncover whether the intent was ransom, revenge, or something altogether more cunning. He allowed a moment for silence to settle, the guests now fully aware they were both observers and participants in a deadly drama. Poirot's keen face remained composed, even genial, as he concluded, "Rest assured, Msamus, the truth glimmers somewhere in this hall. It is our task to coax it into the light, for only then will Lord Ashburn be found wherever he may be and justice restored." As the final chord of the quartet's quartet died away, Poirot moved to the desk once more, lifting the blotter and holding it to the lamp's flame. The warmth caused a second set of words to appear, an unexpected postscript faintly etched. Beneath the first, "Beware the hand that feigns help." Hastings gasped softly. Poirot's eyes sparkled. Hastings, the tapestry grows richer, and already, I fancy, the true meaning of our invisible ink shall be revealed. With that promise, he replaced the blotter, turned to the guests, and prepared for the next phase of his relentless inquiry. Chapter 3. The gathering of suspects. The clock in the hallway chimed the quarter hour as Inspector Japp's footsteps receded, leaving the library cloaked in a tense hush. Poirot stood by the desk. Blotter and invisible ink note returned to their resting place. though the smouldering postscript still weighed heavily on his mind. He turned to the assembled company and spoke with measured courtesy. "Msamis, we now have before us a close circle, those who were present in the hall at the moment Lord Ashburn disappeared. It is imperative that I learn more of each of you and of your relations with the late host only. By understanding motives can we pierce the veil cast by deception." He gestured toward a semicircle of chairs ranged beneath the chandelier. One by one, he invited the guests to introduce themselves more fully and recount their connections to Lord Ashburn. First came Lady Chantal, her poise unshaken though her eyes hinted at impatience. "I am Simone Chantal, at your service," she began, voice smooth as silk. "My husband passed recently, and I came to Lord Ashburn, an old friend, to seek solace and shared memories of better times. We were once fellow patrons of the Paris Salon Society." She paused, fingertips drumming on the armrest. "Our friendship endured decades. Although his recent purchase of that tangerine quill did surprise me, he claimed it was a symbol of our shared cultural pursuits." Poirot nodded. "Madame, your presence here is understandable. Yet I shall note that you value the artistic trappings of life. Tell me, did you notice any change in Lord Ashburn's demeanour this evening, anything that suggested anxiety or expectancy?" Lady Chantal's lips curved into a polite smile. "Not anxiety. No. He was buoyant, even a little nostalgic. Perhaps that is why this," she waved toward the desk, "has taken us all aback." Next, Poirot addressed Dr. Edwin Mallory, who had retreated to stand near the bookshelves, the doctor's com. Professional tone contrasted with the heightened drama. "I have known Lord Ashburn for many years," the physician began. "He was valiant in his support of medical charities, and I treated him for a minor ailment just last month. Nothing serious, an overworked heart, perhaps, but manageable." Mallory's gaze swept the room. "He mentioned tonight that he had something significant to reveal to his wife, something that had weighed on him for some time. I suspect it concerned matters of the heart, emotional, not medical." "Curious," murmured Poirot. He tapped his cane lightly. "Emotional matters can indeed burden one's heart, and might those matters involve another person?" "Doctor," Mallory's lips thinned, "I should not comment further without evidence." "Monsieur," Hastings scribbled furiously. In his notebook, Poirot turned to Mr. Julian Byrne, whose restless energy seemed at odds with the library's solemnity. "Mr. Byrne, our barrister friend," Poirot began. "You have been rather agitated since our arrival. You inspected the portrait of Lady Victoria Ashburn with keen interest. Do you admire old paintings, or did you seek insight into the family's past?" Byrne swallowed. "Admittedly, I was curious about the family lineage. My firm is handling Lord Ashburn's estate affairs, and I wish to ensure that everything is in order. I have not met Lady Victoria long past." "I understand, but portraits can reveal more than mere likenesses." Poirot's eyes glittered. "Indeed. You wish to uncover legacies and entitlements, a prudent occupation. Yet tell me, did you find any discrepancies in the estate documents?" Byrne's gaze flickered to the desk. "Not yet, but I intended to review them privately after dessert. I hope to discuss it with Lord Ashburn this evening, which, alas, cannot now occur." Poirot replied gravely at that moment. Lady Ashburn entered the library, supported by Mr. Barnaby the butler. The gravity of her distress lent her features a fragile beauty. Her gown, once pristine, was flecked with candle wax from her hasty departure. "Forgive me," she whispered, voice trembling. "I feel faint." Poirot crossed to her side with swift courtesy. "Madam, please be seated." Lady Ashburn sank into the nearest chair as Poirot gently offered her a glass of water from the side table. "Take your time. We must proceed thoughtfully, not precipitately. Once she had steadied herself, Poirot resumed his inquiry. "Lady Ashburn, you have known each of these people for some time. Have you not? Perhaps you can shed light on any tensions or jealousies that might explain such a dramatic act this evening." She glanced round, exhaustion mingling with resolve. "Simone and I were dear friends in Paris. Dr. Mary has been family physician and confidant. Julian Byrne, I met him only recently, though he professes to be well acquainted with Lord Ashburn's affairs. And Mr. Fairfax," she paused to regard the tall woman in emerald, "is my cousin by marriage. Visiting from India. We have all been at Ashburn Manor many times." At the mention of Mr. Fairfax, Mrs. Marianne Fairfax stepped forward. Her posture was regal, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "My relations with Henry Ashburn have been strictly familial, madam," she said softly. "I have come to assist with this celebration, though our interactions of late have been formal rather than intimate." She pressed a hand to her throat, removing a narrow pendant glittering with a single sapphire. "I wore this tonight in his honor, his favorite color." Poirot noted the pendant's reflective gleam, a shimmering jewel. "Madam, matching the metaphor in our invisible ink note, your pride in your family, and your taste for the exquisite, are manifest. But consider, might any of these attachments conceal a less savory sentiment, resentment, rivalry, or fear of exposure?" Mrs. Fairfax's calm composure wavered fleetingly. She replaced the pendant and inhaled steadily. "I assure you, monsieur, my family ties are beyond reproach." Poirot tapped his cane on the floor. "Very good. Now, we have the following: Lady Chantal, bound by artistry; Dr. Mary, bound by professional duty; Mr. Byrne, bound by legal obligation; Mrs. Fairfax, bound by family. Each possesses motive, to varying degrees, and yet motive alone is insufficient to drive a man to vanish and to steal his own gift." He turned to Hastings. "Hastings, we must catalogue these bonds and investigate their deeper currents. Past grievances, recent disagreements, and spoken desires." Hastings nodded, flipping a fresh page in his notebook. Poirot then addressed the room more broadly. "Furthermore, I require your candor regarding any unusual conversations you may have overheard this evening, comments made in private, allusions to debts or betrayals, even the slightest expression of malice." Hush fell. Slowly, voices began to rise. Lady Chantal recalled hearing Lord Ashburn mutter about a hidden truth before entering his study. Dr. Mary admitted the host had grown secretive in the days prior. Byrne confessed to a terse exchange with Lord Ashburn in the gallery just before dinner. Mrs. Fairfax mentioned late-night letters delivered by a courier, contents unknown. As each revelation emerged, Poirot listened with rapt attention, nodding gently. He made no immediate judgment, but stored every detail within the recesses of his memory. When the last guest had spoken, he smiled faintly. "Merci, Mzamas, the net draws tighter. We see now that Lord Ashburn's life intersected with each of you in ways both profound and precarious. Yes, the invisible ink warns us of deceit beneath charm. Your recounted remarks hint at secrets yet unspoken. But let us not forget the warning. Beware the hand that feigns help. We have companions and confidants, some of whom may harbor intentions contrary to their kindly facade." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle among them. Then he motioned toward the desk. "We shall continue with individual interviews in the adjoining study. You will each accompany Inspector Japp in turn, while Hastings and I remain here to sift through the physical evidence. Madam, monsieur, please proceed in the order in which you have spoken." As the guests filed out, casting furtive glances at one another, Poirot and Hastings exchanged a glance of quiet determination. The circle had been drawn, the pieces laid bare. Yet the true architect of this elaborate ruse remained hidden. outlines faint as invisible ink, awaiting the illuminating warmth of Poirot's insight, and so the investigation deepened, the gathering of suspects giving way to the probing of souls. Chapter 4. Poirot arrives. Heavy door of the adjoining study closed with a soft click behind the last departing guest, leaving only Captain Hastings and Hercule Poirot within the library. A sliver of moonlight filtered through the tall windows, lending the room an air of hushed expectancy. Poirot, his dark eyes alight with deliberation, turned to Hastings. Mon ami, the moment has come for the true work of the detective, to observe, to deduce, and to unsettle the assumptions of others. We must now make our entrance among the suspects as both guests and judges. For only by placing ourselves within their midst can we discern the tremor of guilt. Hastings nodded, though he felt the familiar flutter of nerves. Shall I accompany you in the first round of interviews? Mais oui, Poirot replied, adjusting his perfectly tied cravat. But each meeting must be orchestrated. We approach with courtesy, then probe with precision. Let us begin with Lady Chantal. A breath later, they re-entered the study, where Inspector Jupp sat behind a polished mahogany desk. Notebook open, the room was sparsely furnished. A pair of high-backed chairs faced the desk, flanked by shelves of leather-bound tomes. A small oil lamp cast a warm glow, illuminating the suspect who sat there, Simone Chantal. Her composure regained. Madam, Poirot began in lilting French. I trust you are comfortable. Lady Chantal inclined her head. Perfectly. Monsieur Poirot, to be certain, Poirot continued, settling into a chair opposite her. I should like to revisit our earlier conversation. You mentioned a long friendship with Lord Ashburn. Pray tell me, in recent weeks, did you detect any change in the tenor of your correspondence? Were letters exchanged that hinted at distress? Or at matters of finance or reputation? Lady Chantal's serene features flickered with thought. Now that you mention it, yes, we wrote nearly nightly when I stayed in London 2 fortnights ago. His last letter was curious to us, almost. Mentioning secrets too delicate to commit to. Paper, secrets. Poirot echoed, steepling his fingers. Such a word bears weight. Do you recall the substance of that missive? She clasped her hands. Only this. When the mask falls, truth remains. Trust no visage. It rides sealed with a crest I did not recognize. And you did not consult another about its origin? Poirot pressed gently. Only Dr. Mary. In passing, she admitted. He said Lord Ashburn seemed agitated, but would not share details. Poirot made a small humming sound, intriguing. So, the invisible ink warning we discovered may not have been the first veiled message. Someone sought to mask anxiety until the appointed moment. He rose. Then paused to regard the pendant at Lady Chantal's throat, a slender silver crescent. Adorned with a single pull, the moonlight made it shimmer just so, and you wear this tonight as well. A gift, perhaps, from the late host. She smiled faintly. Yes. He hoped it would remind me of our shared appreciation for lunar symbolism. Poirot tapped the desk, the shimmer behind the smile. Indeed, a fitting emblem for one who casts an outer calm. Merci. Madam. He inclined his head and stepped back, motioning to Hastings. Your turn. Mon capitaine. Hastings took Lady Chantal's place. His questions more pedestrian but earnest. Once they stepped into the hallway, Poirot murmured, Notice how her eyes never quite met mine when I mentioned the crest. Curious omission. But we shall return, one by one. They proceeded through the study door. Dr. Mallory, the steely-eyed physician, who spoke coolly of his medical ministrations but flickered when probed on Lord Ashburn's emotional state. Mr. Julian Byrne, the barrister, whose practised calm unravelled briefly when questioned about the missing ink bottle, and Mrs. Fairfax, whose sapphire pendant glittered coldly even as she professed ignorance of any malice. Each Interview lasted mere minutes, yet in that time Poirot observed micro-expressions, slight tremors, fleeting hesitations, each betraying something concealed. When the final suspect had left the study, Inspector Japp closed his notebook. "Well, Poirot, no one has confessed to kidnapping or murder. They all have plausible alibis. Plausible." Poirot agreed, smoothing his coat. "But alibis are like silk gloves, smooth on the outside. Yet they hide their hands within. We know no more of their secrets, but not yet the secret of Ashburn Manor." Hastings glanced at Japp. "Shall we confer in here, sir?" Japp nodded, and the three men gathered round the desk. Poirot placed the invisible ink blotter before them, alongside Lady Chantel's crested letter and a small scrap of wax from the gift box's seal. He tapped each in turn. "Observe, 3 separate clues as of stained writing, a private correspondence, and a broken seal, each written, all produced with secrecy in mind. We see that the culprit is careful, educated, and intimately connected to the family. But we must ask, what is the ultimate objective? Is it theft, ransom, revenge, or a spectacle of disgrace?" Inspector Japp stroked his chin. "If it were ransom, we'd have a demand by now, and no sign of bloodshed suggests. Lord Ashburn is alive. Possibly," Poirot conceded, "or very ill. Yet why take the gift? Why remove the ink bottle and write a false warning? It smacks of diversion. The important item may be something the perpetrator cannot openly claim." Hastings frowned. "But what sort of object could be so valuable or incriminating that it demands such elaborate theatrics, something that cuts to the heart of motive?" "Mon ami," Poirot replied, "I suspect it is not an object at all, but information, a document, a confession hidden within that small box. It may identify the true villain among us at that moment." A soft rap sounded at the door. Barnaby entered, bearing a small wooden box carved with the Ashburn crest. He presented it to Poirot respectfully. "Sir, this was found concealed behind a panel in the gallery corridor. It was hidden inside a compartment of the grandfather clock." Poirot's mustache quivered. He lifted the lid, revealing a miniature diary bound in red leather. The cover bore the initials H.A. in gilt. "A diary," Poirot declared, "and one that belongs to Lord Ashburn himself." He opened the first page, where a single entry was hastily scrawled. "Tonight, all shall be revealed. Beware those who smile in friendship, for some mask poison with honeyed words." Poirot tapped the page. "Here is our prize. This diary apparently contains Lord Ashburn's final testament. It names someone he feared, someone he trusted enough to invite, but considered dangerous. We must recover its missing pages and discern whom he meant." Hastings leaned in. "But the pages are intact, sir." Poirot shook his head. "Only the first page remains. I suspect the rest were removed, perhaps the very gift box that once lay on the blotter contained. The missing leaves. We must find them, Hastings, and we must consider who in this house knew of the clock's secret compartment." Inspector Japp looked from Poirot to Hastings. "Then we shall search the gallery clock and question the staff again. Whoever hid that diary is involved, I am certain." Poirot's eyes gleamed, "Indeed. Mon ami, and when we interrogate the staff, we must observe not only their answers, but the slight tremors of their voices and the direction of their gaze. For as the invisible ink taught us, the truth requires the warmth of observation to appear." With that declaration, Poirot swept the diary back into its box, handed the keys to Japp, and strode from the library. Hastings at his side. The first investigations had laid the groundwork. Now the search for hidden leaves, obscured motives, and subtle betrayals would begin in earnest. And amidst the grand ticking of the grandfather clock, The real game of psychological cat and mouse was truly underway. Chapter 5. Initial interviews begin. The hush of the library felt heavier now than to floors of. Ashburn Manor lay between the gathered suspects and the night's earlier turmoil. Candlelight flickered against the high ceiling, and the patter of raindrops against the leaded glass windows provided a steady, contemplative rhythm at a small round table near the hearth. Poirot had ranged individual interview stations, a single chair, a writing desk, and a soft lamp for each suspect. Captain Hastings and Inspector Jupp flanked him. Their roles were clear. Hastings to note details, Jupp to ensure order. Mzamas, Poirot began, voice courteous yet commanding. The time has come to speak one-on-one. I ask for a candor and precision. Do not fear my questions, rather. Consider them an opportunity to unveil truths you yourself may not yet have admitted. He turned first to Lady Chantle, who waited with serene composure. Mademoiselle, you shall have the honor of the first interview. Lady Simone Chantalelady Chantle seated herself with grace, fingers brushing the surface of the desk as if to steady a pianist's nerves before a recital. Poirot offered her a small notebook and quill. Madam, permit me to return to your visit 2 weeks past, he said. You wrote nightly letters, you told me. Did Lord Ashburn ever express regret, hesitation, or fear in those correspondences? She drew a breath and considered. Only once did his tone shift, she admitted. Voice soft, he wrote, I treasure our collusions in art. Simone, but something stirs in the house that chills me. He did not elaborate. Collusions in art, Poirot echoed, pen poised, an odd phrase. Did you ask for clarification? I did, she said, but he laughed it off as poetic fancy. I believed it frivolity until tonight. Poirot's mustache twitched. Frivolity can conceal much, and you, as an artist. Know well the power of metaphor. Tell me, mademoiselle, did you ever sense someone else's presence when you wrote those letters? A servant's overstep, a hidden wetness? Lady Chantelle's eyes flickered. I cannot say. I wrote in my rooms, alone. Yet I did feel, at times, as though the walls listened, a useful intuition. Poirot murmured, Merci, Simone. He rose and signalled Inspector Jupp to accompany her back to the antechamber. As she left, Hastings noted the faint sheen of perspiration at her hairline, a subtle tremor that belied her composed tone. Dr. Edwin Mallory next. Dr. Mallory settled into the interviewer's chair. He regarded Poirot with professional detachment. Doctor, Poirot began. You attended Lord Ashburn in recent weeks. You told us of his cardiac concerns. Was there any occasion where he exhibited unusual stress, perhaps during the day of his disappearance? Mallory's lips compressed. He was nervous when we spoke of his will. He feared an illegitimate heir might emerge to claim his estates. A legitimate concern, Poirot agreed. And did he express suspicion of any individual, perhaps? Someone in his social circle? The doctor paused. I steady. He mentioned a cousin in India, Mrs. Fairfax. He believed she discovered a truth in his documents. Something that might alter the inheritance, Poirot scribbled, indeed. And yet Mrs. Fairfax denies the awareness of such letters. Tell me, Doctor, did you ever see correspondence between them? Perhaps a note or an envelope bearing her handwriting? Mallory hesitated. There was a letter. Yes, delivered last week. It bore no signature, but the handwriting resembled Mrs. Fairfax's. He showed it to me. He said it threatened exposure of a family scandal. And that scandal, Poirot pursued, could it relate to your medical practice, a history of illness, treatment, or perhaps a misdiagnosis? Mallory's jaw clenched. No, monsieur. My practice has no bearing. The scandal is personal, not medical. He rose stiffly. I have nothing further. As he departed, Poirot tapped the desk. A letter unsent, unsigned, and unsigned by an heir apparent yet recognized by the doctor. Intriguing. Mr. Julian Byrne, A. Julian Byrne, arrived next, adjusting his cufflinks with visible distraction. Poirot studied him coolly. Mr. Byrne, you wished to review estate papers tonight. You told me of discrepancies. Did Lord Ashburn confide in you regarding debts, loans, or burdensome obligations? Byrne leaned forward. He was entangled in debts to a London banker. He said he feared discovery by his trustees, though I advised him the matter could be settled discreetly. Poirot tapped his pen. Discreetly settled debts, and by whom? A banker's ledger is explicit. Did you see his accounts? Byrne's expression darkened. No. I was waiting for his permission. But he showed me an envelope of bank statements earlier today. An envelope. Poirot repeated, and did you open it? Byrne's glance flickered. Admittedly, I did, only to confirm. The figures, but the statements were missing when I sought them after dinner. Aha, Poirot's eyes gleamed. So someone removed them perhaps to conceal the full extent of his liabilities. He rose. Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Your candor is appreciated. As Byrne left, Hastings murmured, He's clearly nervous. Sir, Poirot smiled slightly. Nervous men often betray more than they intend. Mrs. Marianne Fairfax took her turn. Composed yet distant, Poirot regarded a sapphire pendant, now dim in the lamplight. Madam, he began. You visited India a year past. Correct. You must know much of family law. What secrets did you bring? She inclined her head. I brought memories, monsieur. No secrets save those common to any family. Disputes over land, inheritance, and pride. She paused. Yet my cousin did mention a lost deed and agreement made in Calcutta that could invalidate his line. Of succession and this lost deed. Poirot pressed. Did you see it, or merely hear of it? I saw references, she admitted, scrawled in an old journal I discovered in the Manor's archives. Poirot's brow arched. The Manor's archives where few have access, and yet, tonight, someone removed Lord Ashburn's diary from a secret clock compartment. Do you frequent that wing? Her gaze hardened. I have no reason to inspect. The clock. My journal was found elsewhere in the family chapel. He nodded, rising. Very well. Madam, I leave you with this thought. Sometimes the most innocent facade conceals the deepest ambition. When the final interview concluded, Poirot rejoined Hastings and Japp in the library's centre. The suspects, now resting in the antechamber, fidgeted behind locked doors. On the table lay the discarded notebooks and quills. Marred with spilled ink and hastily scrawled notes, Poirot surveyed the evidence. We have heard from each. Poetic warnings, family scandal, financial burdens, and colonial deeds. Each motive is credible yet none sufficient alone to provoke this elaborate abduction. He tapped the scattered pages. But note the inconsistencies. Lady Chantel's unseen watches, Mallory's unsigned letter, Byrne's bank statements, Fairfax's hidden journal. The common thread is concealment documents, memories, and objects kept from sight. Inspector Japp stroked his mustache. So who among them wields both motive and means? Someone educated in secrecy. Poirot replied. Who knows the Manor's hidden compartments and understands the delicacy of documents, and someone who believes they can manipulate others' perceptions, hence our invisible ink notes. Hastings interjected. But surely someone among them has the locksmith knowledge or the architectural insight to open. That clock panel, Poirot's eyes twinkled precisely. Hastings, I believe the culprit is one whose profession or pastime involves precision mechanisms, perhaps an artist accustomed to secret compartments in frames, or a lawyer versed in hidden clauses. We must observe who among them has touched the clock or shown interest in the Manor's design. He paused, letting the storm's rumble underscore his words. For now, we gather these notebooks, compare handwriting, search for overlapping phrases, and when dawn breaks, we shall examine the clock, the chapel archives, and the bank ledger with fresh eyes. But tonight, Hastings, you and I must rest. Our minds, this was only the first volley in a long battle of wits. With that, Poirot allowed himself a small smile. The initial interviews had yielded a wealth of clues and contradictions. And already the outlines of the true culprit flickered, beneath the surface-like writing in invisible ink, awaiting the proper reveal. And while the suspects slept behind locked doors, their secrets would swirl in Poirot's mind, each waiting its moment in the light. Chapter 6. The first false lead. A restless dawn light filtered through the high mullioned windows of Ashburn Manor, painting the library in pale gold. The storm had passed, leaving the garden's terraced hedges slick and fragrant with rain. Yet within these walls, tension remained taut as the manor's grand clock ticked away each precious minute. Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Jupp gathered around the polished table, strewn with notebooks, diaries, and ink-stained blotter fragments. The soft rustle of paper was the only sound until Poirot cleared his throat. "Mzamis, it is time to pursue our first concrete lead," he announced. "Last night's interviews have revealed all motives, but only one path points clearly toward immediate action." He picked up Lady Chantel's notebook. Observe here the phrase "veil of wings," mentioned in her correspondence, and elsewhere the missing pages of Lord Ashburn's diary, taken from the clock compartment, described a hidden pair of earrings, family heirlooms that once belonged to Lady Victoria Ashburn. If one wished to discredit the late Duchess's reputation, revealing these earrings, said to be cursed, would serve nicely. Hastings raised an eyebrow. "So you think someone was after a family legend?" "Precisely," Poirot replied. "Cultural. Superstition can be as potent as any written threat. Now, who among our suspects would gain both financially and socially by uniting those earrings with Lord Ashburn's hidden documents?" He laid out his deduction map, dashed lines connecting jewelry, diary, and a forged letter. "Mark well, Hastings, that the sapphires in Mrs. Fairfax's pendant match the description of those cursed earrings, down to the faint inclusions noted in Antomina's 1922 ledger." Inspector Jupp nodded thoughtfully. "We should search Mrs. Fairfax's rooms, sir. If she possesses those earrings, we may find them and perhaps the missing diary pages." Poirot's mustache quivered. "An excellent plan. But remember our warning. Beware the hand that feigns help. We must question her under pretense of friendliness, lest she destroy the evidence." A discreet party assembled outside Mrs. Fairfax's suite, Inspector Jupp at the door, Hastings in the corridor, and Poirot standing reserve. Lady Chantel and Dr. Mary observed from the staircase landing, ensuring no suspicious interference. Poirot tapped the door lightly. "Madam Fairfax, may we enter?" he called in gentle tones. The door opened to reveal Mrs. Fairfax in a simple morning robe, her sapphire pendant still at her throat. She offered a measured curtsy. "Of course, monsieur, come in." The suite was elegantly sparse, a polished writing desk, delicate floral draperies, and a large armoire built into the wall. Poirot stepped inside. Allowing Jupp to follow, Hastings lingered at the threshold, ready to step in if needed. "Madam," Poirot began, "we seek a trinketan heirloom earring set that once accompanied your pendant. My intuition tells me these pieces are here, perhaps concealed." He produced a small leather pouch. "I wonder if you might show me anything of family note." That we might confirm or dispel this supposition, Mrs. Fairfax's expression remained composed, but her hand trembled as she reached for a silk scarf draped over the arm of a chair. She wrapped it round her neck to hide the pendant, then turned toward the armoire. Of course, monsieur. I can show you my jewelry." She unlocked the armoire's door with a practiced twist. The interior revealed rows of hat boxes, garment, bags, and a small velvet-lined jewelry box on the top shelf. She lifted it down and offered it to Poirot, her voice even. "Here, mon ami." Poirot opened the box. Inside lay a gold chain and a pair of modest pearl-drop earrings clearly not the sapphires he sought. He gave a polite nod. "Merci. Madame, and is that all?" She glanced hesitantly back toward the armoire. Jup stepped forward. "Perhaps there is another box, madame. One you might have forgotten." Mrs. Fairfax's composure flickered. She hesitated, then closed the jewelry box and set it aside. "That is all," she said firmly. Poirot smiled gently. "Very well. Thank you for your cooperation." He closed the box and handed it back. Jup and Hastings exchanged glances. As they left, Hastings overheard a faint click behind them, the sound of a concealed catch activating. "Sir," Hastings whispered. "Did you hear that?" Poirot paused. "Hand on the door." "I did, Hastings. And it came from behind the tapestry over yonder." He pointed to a wall-mounted Gobelins tapestry depicting a hunting scene. "An escape route, perhaps. But it suggests our lady here is less forthcoming than she appears." Down in the grand hall, Poirot convened a brief conference with Jup and Hastings. "Our search has proven fruitless, but the hidden mechanism indicates a secondary hiding place," he said. "Mrs. Fairfax knows the manor intimately, family member. After all, she would be aware of secret panels." Inspector Jup frowned. "We can open that panel, but it may contain nothing, or a mechanism might injure the operator." "True," Poirot admitted. "Yet if she aimed to conceal the earrings and pages, she would choose a spot rarely accessed. We must ask the housekeeper, Mrs. Dormer, about secret compartments." Hastings hurried off to summon Mrs. Dormer, while Poirot and Jup examined the tapestry more closely. Poirot ran a gloved finger along its edge. "We must be cautious," he murmured. "A goal is evidence, not confrontation." Moments later, Mrs. Dormer, a stout woman with iron grey hair, arrived. She curtsied respectfully. "Monsieur Poirot, how may I assist?" Poirot indicated the tapestry. "Madam, could you confirm whether there are secret panels in this wall?" "I believe a mechanism is installed behind these hangings." The housekeeper's face turned ashen. She swallowed. "Ah, yes, monsieur. But that panel is disused. It leads to an abandoned storage passage above the gallery. It was sealed years ago due to disrepair." "Precisely," Poirot said. "Now, would you be so kind as to unlock it, so that we may inspect its contents?" Mrs. Dormer's hand shook. As she produced a tarnished iron key, she fitted it into a small hidden slot behind the tapestry's left edge and turned. The panel swung outward with a protesting creak, revealing a narrow, dust-choked passage. Inspector Jup lit a small lantern and leaned inside. "It's dark, and there's a box." He reached in and withdrew a wooden casket tied with twine. The three of them examined its contents. A silk-lined case, bulging slightly. Poirot's eyes gleamed. He opened the case to reveal a pair of sapphire earrings identical to those in Antomina's letter-hand. Beneath them, several water-stained pages from Lord Ashburn's diary. Hastings gasped softly. "Sir, we found them," he exclaimed. Poirot closed the case, handling the sapphires with white-gloved care. "Indeed. And though these confirm our theory of hidden inheritance machinations, I suspect a deeper artifice. The diary pages, when reunited with the first entry, will name someone explicitly. Yet the culprit contrived the diversion, leading us to suspect family legend rather than the true motive." Inspector Jup frowned. "Madame Fairfax will have an explanation, sir." "Of course," Poirot agreed. "But recall, A false lead is a trap. We must follow the diary's instructions to beware the hand that feigns help. Whoever guided us to this hiding place is already 2 moves ahead. He touched the unbroken twine. We must determine who held the key and when they accessed this secret passage. Hastings looked between Japp and Poirot. Lay a trap. Sir, Poirot's lips curved into a slight smile. Hastings, tonight, we shall pretend to have arrested Madame Fairfax to flush out the true conspirator, and when they attempt to intervene, we will catch them in the act. As the trials of perception and deception spun onward, Poirot replaced the panel, relocked the tapestry, and sent Hastings to prepare Inspector Japp for the staged rest. The first false lead had been revealed and, in its unveiling, it bore the true villain's signature, a masterstroke of psychological misdirection. Chapter 7. The psychological Gourmet's twilight deepened. Ashburn Manor took on a solemn quiet, disturbed only by the distant tolling of the grandfather clock and the soft patter of servants ranging the evening meal. Within the library's hush, Hercule Poirot gathered Captain Hastings and Inspector Japp for a whispered consultation. The sapphire earrings and salvaged diary pages lay before them on the polished table. Their significance undeniable, but the true architect of deception remained at large. Msamus, Poirot began softly. We have retrieved our prize, yet the ruse was designed to mislead. Now, we embark upon the psychological phase of our investigation. We shall apply pressure in such a way that the guilty party, believing themselves secure, will reveal their hand. Hastings leaned forward. So we proceed with the staged rest of Madame Fairfax. Exactly. Poirot confirmed. But we must be artful. Madame Fairfax is innocent of this particular deception. She was merely a pawn. Our goal is to unsettle the true culprit into action. We will insinuate that Mrs. Fairfax is the conspirator, and observe who rushes to defend her. Inspector Japp nodded. I will coordinate with the staff to spread word discreetly. They will report that Mrs. Fairfax is to be detained pending further questioning. That should cause someone to intervene. 'Tis been, Poirot said, glancing at the doorway. In the meantime, Hastings, you shall rehearse. Your role as devoted defender. Cue your protestations and feigned indignation. Let us begin. Moments later, the announcement reverberated through the corridors. By order of Inspector Japp, Mrs. Fairfax is to remain in the library until further notice, within minutes. Housekeeper Dormer appeared at the study door to usher Mrs. Fairfax. Inside, her escort firm but courteous dot as the secretary led Mrs. Fairfax into the library. Word swiftly spread that she faced temporary confinement. Lady Chantle, Dr. Mary, and Julian Byrne were summoned under the pretext of urgent witness statements. Each arrived in turn. Their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. Mrs. Fairfax stood by the hearth, her sapphire pendant shimmering in the lamp's glow. When Byrne and the others entered, she offered them a composed nod. I am told I must wait here, she said quietly. It seems I am suspected. Byrne stepped forward, voice laced with feigned shock. Suspected, madam. This is preposterous. You have done nothing but attend your cousin's celebration. I shall speak on your behalf. He approached Inspector Japp, who had taken a post near the desk. Hastings, seizing his cue, strode in after the others. He placed a protective hand on Mrs. Fairfax's shoulder. This is absurd, he exclaimed loudly. She has been nothing but gracious tonight. What proof have you against her? Dr. Mary, summoned next, lingered at the fringes. His features were inscrutable concern or calculation. Lady Chantle hovered at the doorway, her eyes bright with restrained excitement. The trio waited to see who, if anyone, would move. Beyond mere words, Poirot watched from the shadow of the bookcase, cane in hand. his gaze sweeping each face. He noted how Burns's voice faltered when he spoke too loudly, and how Lady Chantel's gloved fingers tapped the edge of her clutch. Most tellingly, he observed Dr. Mallory's soft breathing, as if holding something back. "Thank you all for coming," Inspector Jupp said, clearing his throat. "We have reason to believe Mrs. Fairfax played a role in concealing Lord Ashburn's valuables until we sort this out. She must remain here under supervision." Burn bristled. "Supervision? This is an affront to her dignity. I demand you release her at once." At these words, Dr. Mallory stepped forward, voice low. "Inspector, if you proceed to detain her, it would severely damage the family's reputation. I implore you to reconsider." His eyes flicked to Lady Chantal, then back to Hastings, as though seeking support. Hastings gave Mallory a questioning glance. "Doctor, on what grounds do you object? Are you defending her? Or is there something you fear coming to light?" Mallory's hands clenched. He inhaled and exhaled. "On purely humanitarian grounds. Captain, a lady of her standing should not be humiliated without compelling evidence." Poirot, noting the doctor's increasing agitation, strode forward. Cane tapping the floor. "Monsieur Mallory, your concern is admirable. But tell me, do you fear that Mrs. Fairfax is guilty, or that she is being used as a scapegoat to distract from the true conspirator?" "S intentions," Japp frowned. "What are you implying?" Poirot, with impeccable courtesy. Poirot addressed Dr. Mallory directly. "Doctor, last night you mentioned a letter threatening exposure of a family scandal. Yet you deny involvement. Now you beseech us not to harm Mrs. Fairfax's reputation. Whom do you protect, your patient, or your own interests?" Mallory's composed mask cracked. His gaze darted to the sapphire pendant at Mrs. Fairfax's throat, then to the hidden diary pages on the desk. "Monsieur Poirot," he began, voice trembling. Hastings leaned in. "Speak plainly." "Doctor." Mallory exhaled sharply, as if deciding between honesty and self-preservation. He swallowed, then spoke. Voice tight. "I did not expect you to erase the panel so quickly. The earrings were indeed meant to frame Marianne, to shame her into relinquishing her claim. But the diary's true contents, those pages spoke of something far worse. Lord Ashburn's intention to unmask. A betrayal of trust that could ruin other reputations." Burns's mouth fell open. Lady Chantal covered hers with a gloved hand. Hastings reached for Mallory's arm, and who was to be thus unmasked? Mallory shook his head as if in pain. "I cannot say. I only knew that the matter concerned someone close, someone who feigned compassion while plotting his downfall. I tried to protect Marianne from disgrace." Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving Mallory's. "Bean, you have admitted your motive and your involvement in the diversion. Yet the true culprit is someone who influenced you, someone you feared would be harmed by the diary's revelations." Inspector Jupp stepped forward, handcuffs in hand. "Dr. Mallory, you are under arrest for conspiracy and obstruction of justice." A palpable gasp filled the library. But before Mallory could protest, Lady Chantal broke from the group, eyes wild. "No, you must not take him. He is innocent. The one who truly sought to control Lord Ashburn was here in plain sight." She pointed directly at Captain Hastings. Hastings recoiled. "What nonsense is this?" Lady Chantel's expression hardened. "Poirot, you did not see how Mallory acted. It was you who drove him to confess. But it was I who first suspected the doctor, and I who arranged to plant the diary pages in the clock compartment." Poirot's calm facade remained intact, though his eyes glinted with interest. "Mademoiselle, you confessed to manipulation." She stood her ground, voice firm. "Yes, I learned of the legend of the cursed sapphires and the secret compartment. I knew that if the earrings were found, attention would shift away from the true secret. Marianne's lost deed, which would grant her greater inheritance than any of us. I intended to implicate her by framing her cousin. Hastings stared, incredulous. You. But why involve Mallory at all? Lady Chantal gave a bitter laugh. He cared for Lord Ashburn's secrets as a physician cares for his patient protectively. I used his loyalty to plant the tale of dark family scandal, directing suspicion toward Marianne. The real beneficiary was supposed to be me. I would secure the deed, the diamonds, and the gratitude of the Ashburn family. Inspector Jepp stepped forward. Simone Chantal, you are under arrest for conspiracy to defraud and conspiracy to abduct. As the constables moved to apprehend her, Poirot lowered his voice to Hastings. Hastings, observe Mallory's expression relief. Not fear. Mallory nodded slightly. Poirot addressed the astonished company. The true conspirator is Miss Simone Chantal. She used the cursed sapphires as a false motif, manipulated the doctor's loyalty, and orchestrated the disappearance to access both diary and deed. The warning to beware the hand that feigns help was meant for her fellow conspirators. But she never saw the trap closing round her. A hush fell, broken only by Lady Chantal's cry of indignation. Hastings closed his notebook and glanced at Poirot. Bravo, sir. The psychological game has indeed been won. Poirot's lips curved in serene triumph. Ila perfection. Hastings, and now, from misdirection to revelation, we may proceed to restore Lord Ashburn's good name and, I trust, find him unharmed. Chapter 8. A secondary mystery morning light seeped through the library's arched windows, illuminating the still scattered notebooks and the faint smudges on the blotter from the night's revelations. The household stirred as servants prepared a modest breakfast in the adjoining parlour. Tea, freshly baked scones, and soft-boiled eggs. Hercule Poirot, flanked by Captain Hastings and Inspector Jepp, presided over the spread, mindful that the day's agenda held more than simple rest. Indeed, my friends, Poirot remarked as Hastings poured steaming tea into delicate porcelain cups, we must attend to the wounds inflicted by last night's revelations. Yet caution remains our ally. There may be those among us who resent Madame Chantal's arrest or who seek to silence further disclosures. Hastings nodded, stirring sugar into his cup. I confess I slept little, sir. The diary pages, the sapphires, the staged confessionate, all feels as though another twist awaits. Precisely, Poirot replied, and that is why we must remain vigilant. They moved to the parlour, where a small round table had been set. Hastings lifted his cup and took a deliberate sip, then paused, brow furrowing as he set the porcelain aside. Hastings, Poirot asked, alarmed at the sudden pallor of his companion's face. Before Hastings could respond, his hand trembled and the cup clattered to the saucer. He gasped, a low, strangled sound, and slumped forward, head landing heavily on the table. Jepp and Poirot sprang from their seats. Help! Poirot called to the nearest maid, who rushed forward. Jepp checked Hastings's pulse, still beating, but faint, the inspector said. Voices echoing in the sudden panic. Something's wrong with his tea. Poirot dipped a fingertip into the spilled liquid. It shimmered with a faint oiliness. He sniffed gently, detecting a metallic tang. Poison, Poirot declared softly, lifting Hastings's chin and wiping the corner of his mouth. Mon Dieu. Quick ammonia and smelling salts. The maid dashed for the medicine chest as Poirot and Jepp steadied Hastings. Moments later, Hastings's eyelids fluttered, and consciousness returned with a shuddering breath. Sir, I felt as though a snake coiled in my throat. He whispered, voice hoarse. What happened? Your tea was laced, Poirot said gravely, glancing at the half-finished pot. Someone anticipated that the morning's calm would lure us into complacency, instead of a mere diversion. They chose violence. Inspector Japp stood, eyes narrowing. We'll need to analyze the teapot and the tea leaves. Who had access to them? Poirot's lips curved in a wry smile. Let us consider the kitchen route. The teapot arrived here from the pantry undisturbed. Yet someone must have tampered with the leaves or added a toxic tincture. We must retrace the path of that teapot from pantry to parlor. Hastings. Did you observe who fetched the tea? Hastings, still pale, closed his eyes. I saw Mary. The maid. Bring it in. But she seemed nervous, as if hesitant. Japp barked an order. Fetch Mary, and send for Mrs. Dormer. She will know of any missing substances from the larder or medicine. Chest. Poirot bent to inspect the fallen cup. He noted a distinct pattern carved into the underside of its saucer, an intricate motif of interlocking circles. He traced it thoughtfully. Notice this, he murmured. These cups belong to the Ashburn service, identical in every set. Yet this pattern is worn slightly unevenly here, suggesting the cup has been handled more often than its fellows. Someone familiar with this pattern used this specific cup. A servant, perhaps, or even one of the suspects accustomed to afternoon tea rituals. At that moment, Mary appeared, cheeks flushed. Flanked by the housekeeper, Mrs. Dormer. Mary's eyes widened at Hastings's condition. Mary, Poirot said gently, did you bring this teapot yourself, or did another instruct you? Mary swallowed. I fetched it after Mrs. Dormer told me to prepare tea for Monsieur Hastings and Monsieur Poirot. Mrs. Dormer stepped forward. I did indeed ask Mary to prepare tea, but I did not instruct her to add anything unusual. The tinctures in the medicine chest are accounted for except one vial of prussic acid, which I noticed missing this morning. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Prussic acid, hydrogen cyanide, is swift-acting poison, and that vial was kept for specimens in Dr. Mallory's care. I believe. Mrs. Dormer nodded reluctantly. Yes, monsieur. He used it for examinations. I assumed he returned it. But Dr. Mallory was not present. Poirot exchanged a glance with Japp. Summon Dr. Mallory immediately. Poirot instructed. His explanation for the missing vial will be most illuminating. Within the hour, Dr. Mallory appeared in the parlor, expression tight. He approached silently, head bowed as if in contrition. Doctor, Poirot began. You will recall our conversation regarding the chemical reagents in your care. Mrs. Dormer reports that a vial of prussic acid is missing. Will you please account for its whereabouts? Mallory's lips quivered. Ah, yes, Monsieur Poirot. I obtained that vial last night to prepare a stabilization solution for a patient. Afterwards, I returned it to the medicine chest at least. I believed I did. Poirot's gaze did not waver. Have you checked your study table, your pockets, or any other location where it might have been inadvertently left? Mallory's eyes flickered toward the teapot. He swallowed. I see no vial anywhere, but I shall search immediately. He turned to leave, then paused, knuckles whitening on the door frame. Doctor. Poirot called. One more question. Did you add anything to Captain Hastings's tea this morning to test for toxins? Perhaps as an experiment. Mallory froze. An experiment, he echoed, voice quivering. No, no, I would never endanger him. Poirot stepped closer, cane tapping lightly. Yet you are the only one with prior knowledge of both the missing vial and its lethality. You were consulted here for your scientific acumen, why not for your integrity? His tone was gentle but unyielding. Mallory's composure broke. He sank into a chair, head in hands. Monsieur, he whispered. I feared it would be useful to demonstrate how easily one might fall victim to such a scheme. I intended only to test your vigilance. I did not expect you to drink the tea. Hastings, still weak, pushed himself upright. You almost killed me. Mallory looked up, eyes filled with regret. I am sorry, so terribly sorry. I did not mean to harm you, only to prove a point. Poirot exhaled slowly. A dangerous point. Doctor, we shall require formal assurances and the recovery of that vial lest this demonstration become truly catastrophic. Inspector Jupp snapped his notebook closed. Dr. Mallory, I am sure you meant no real harm, but you took a grievous risk. I will see that you remain under watch. As Mallory nodded, stunned, the true urgency of the secondary crime settled upon them. Someone had exploited medical trust to threaten a life, shifting suspicion and deepening the mystery. Poirot placed a steady hand on Hastings's shoulder. Captain, your brush with death is itself a message from our culprit, that they remain undeterred. We must now widen our circle of inquiry to staff, to hidden chambers, and to the darkest impulses of those who serve. He paused, gaze sweeping the room. For only by recognizing that the enemy wields both subtlety and science can we hope to bring this drama to its rightful conclusion. As Hastings leaned on Poirot for support and Jupp rang for additional guards, the manor's windows framed the sky turning grey, once more ominous portents that the secondary mystery would carry them deep. Out into peril before the final truths emerged Chapter 9. Hidden connections. Late morning sunlight filtered through the curtains of the library, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the still air. The events of the past hours, Lord Ashburn's disappearance, the diary's recovery, Madame Chantelle's rest, and Hastings's near-fatal poisoning had left the household in a fragile state. Yet Hercule Poirot, unruffled and alert, summoned Captain Hastings and Inspector Jupp to the centre table, where the scattered evidence lay waiting for a further scrutiny. Msamus, Poirot began. We have seen misdirection, confession, and violence. Now we must examine the hidden threads that bind these people together, connections that their statements and actions have not yet disclosed. Only by uncovering these will we truly understand the architecture of this crime. He picked up Lady Chantelle's crested letter, then the torn diary pages, and set them before them in a line. Observe, each clue touches two or more individuals, a letter shared between Chantelle and Mallory, the diary implicating Fairfax but hidden by Chantelle. The poisoned tea meant for Hastings but accessed through Dormer and Mallory. We must map these intersections. Hastings leaned in over a fresh sheet of paper. Shall I draw the diagram? Sir, please, Poirot replied. Hastings sketched circles for each suspect. Lady Chantelle, Dr. Mallory, Mrs. Fairfax, Mr. Byrne, and even including housekeeper Dormer and maid Mary. Lines connected overlapping interactions, emotional confidences, professional obligations, and clandestine meetings. Inspector Jupp studied the emerging network. I note that Dr. Mallory spoke to Chantelle about Lord Ashburn's secrets, yet he also consulted with Fairfax, and Mary fetched the tea under Mrs. Dormer's direction. Poirot nodded, steepling his fingers. Exactly. But there are more subtle links. We know Mrs. Fairfax discovered the deed in the chapel archives to which Dr. Mallory had free access during his medical rounds. Byrne, as a state counsel, also perused those records, and Lady Chantelle, as an artist, spent solitary hours sketching in the chapel's quiet corners, ostensibly for inspiration. Hastings tapped the paper, so the chapel was a convergence point. A secluded place where secrets might be exchanged, hidden or stolen. We must revisit that scene. Poirot rose and beckoned Jupp. Come, let us walk the corridors and observe. The trio made their way through silent passages, past family portraits whose eyes seemed to follow them. The chapel door stood ajar, revealing pews dusted with candle wax and a small alcove to the side. Poirot crouched to examine scrawled notes in the alcove's ledger. this entry," he said, pointing to a faint penciled annotation beneath Fairfax's journal reference. "Our transfers reveal more than Canberra. Says Lady Chantel's handwriting." Japp raised an eyebrow. "It's her handwriting." Hastings peered. "Yes, it matches the style of her letter. But why annotate the archive ledger?" Poirot stood, pressing a finger to his lip to mark an opportunity. She needed to know when Byrne or Fairfax would be alone here, to seize the diary's pages or to plant evidence. Yet why involve Mallory unless she required a learned accomplice to explain chemical aspects to the doctor? And how did Mary enter this picture? They heard soft footsteps behind them. Mary, the maid, appeared in the doorway, eyes downcast. "Monsieur Poirot," she murmured. I hope to speak with you. Speak freely." "Mary," Poirot invited kindly. The maid hesitated, then lifted her chin. "I heard voices here last night, not Mrs. Fairfax's, not Lady Chantel's, not the doctor's, but another, a low, urgent whisper. I dared not investigate then. But this morning, when the tea was prepared, I recognized the same voice giving Mrs. Dorm instructions." Poirot exchanged a glance with Japp. "Whose voice was it?" "Mary." She swallowed. "Mr. Julian Burns. I saw him slip behind the altar when he thought no one watched. He spoke into his cuff. The deed must be secured at dawn. No loose ends." Hastings's pen clattered to the floor. "Byrne. We suspected his legal maneuvers. But not this." Japp stepped forward gently. "Thank you. Mary, you have shown great courage by telling us." As Mary scurried away, Poirot turned to his companions. "There it is, Mr. Burns' true role. He alone stood to gain from the lost deed's recovery greater than Madame Chantal, whose ambitions were material, or Dr. Mallory, whose loyalty lay with his patient. Byrne, by profession, understood legal hierarchies and inheritance pressures." They returned to the library, where Betty Dormer waited. Poirot addressed her directly. "Madam, you instructed the maid to fetch the tea and prepare it according to someone's directions. Was that Mr. Byrne?" Dormer's eyes widened. "Monsieur, I only followed orders. Mr. Byrne whispered to me at dawn, he said, to add a drop of the usual tincture to the captain's tea, to ensure no interruptions while he retrieved the deed from the chapel." Inspector Japp's voice was stern. "Housekeeper, you will remain here until I question you further." Poirot ranged the ledger, the diary pages, and Byrne's letter complaining of financial ruin on the table. He looked at Hastings. "Note the pattern. Byrne manipulated Chantal to frame Fairfax, used Mallory's loyalty to conceal the poison experiment, and then attempted to eliminate Hastings, our greatest obstacle, to seize the deed unchallenged." He turned to Japp. "Circulate word that Byrne is to be detained pending further questions. Let us see if he tries to flee." Japp nodded and strode from the room, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone. Hastings exclaimed, "Sir, this web. I never suspected Byrne." Poirot smiled gently. "Mon capitaine, that is the nature of hidden connections. They are not revealed by evidence alone, but by the interplay of motives and opportunities. And now that we have exposed the true architect, only the final confrontation remains." He replaced the ledger and diary pages in the blotter's protective sleeve. "But we must still find Lord Ashburn. Byrne may have hidden him in the manor, or perhaps in a location he deemed secure. We must search the vault beneath the library where confidential papers are kept and the servants' wing, where none would think to look." Hastings stood, determination lighting his features. "I will gather the staff, sir. We'll search every corner." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Excellent, Hastings, and I shall prepare to confront Mr. Byrne. The hidden connections have led us here to the heart of the deception. Soon We shall restore order to Ashburn Manor and rescue its missing lord as they move to mobilize the household. The atmosphere shifted from tension to resolve. The tangled relationships, once cloaked in secrecy, had been untangled by observation, courage, and meticulous deduction. Yet the mystery of Lord Ashburn's whereabouts remained an ominous final piece awaiting discovery in the manor's deepest recesses. Chapter 10. Poirot's secret clue. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the library's parquet floor as Poirot, Hastings, and Inspector Japp reconvened to plan their final moves. The household staff, alerted to the full extent of Julian Burns' machinations, had begun a systematic search of the manor's hidden vaults, servant passages, and the subterranean wine cellars. Yet, despite their efforts, Lord Ashburn remained elusive. Poirot stood before the fire, fingers steepled beneath his chin, eyes closed in deep thought. "Mon capitaine," he said at last, "we have uncovered the culprit, revealed his web of deceit, and mobilized our resources, and yet the greatest mystery persists, the location of our missing host." Hastings glanced anxiously at the doorway. "Sir, staff have reported every locked cabinet empty. The clocks, the chapel, the wine cellars, even the greenhouse, no sign of Lord Ashburn." Inspector Japp frowned. "He must be somewhere secure, perhaps within the manor itself. Burn would know the hidden compartments and maintenance routes, but where?" Poirot tapped his cane. "Gently, but it is not brute force that will guide us to his hiding place, mon ami, but a subtle insight, my secret clue. We have overlooked one detail, camouflaged amid the misdirection. It lies in the very first note written in invisible ink." He reached into his breast pocket and produced the original blotter card, its lemon-stained script still legible. Unfolding it, he recited the 2 lines, "The truth is veiled by those who trust. Seek the shimmer behind the smile." Hastings frowned. "We interpreted shimmer as the sapphires. That led us to Mrs. Fairfax, but that was a red herring. Exactement." Poirot smiled. "Shimmer must refer instead to another gleam, one less obvious than jewels, something we see daily yet take for granted." He tapped the rim of his bowler hat. "The brass fittings on this desk, the polished doorknobs, the sheen of the grandfather clock's pendulum, each glimmers under light. But one among them is unique." Japp shifted. "You mean one object has a different sheen, a different angle of reflection?" Poirot replied, eyes bright. "I recalled that when I first arrived, prior to the storm, I noticed the crystal sphere atop Lord Ashburn's desk lamp refracting light, oddly casting a prism of tiny rainbows across the blotter. But I did not pursue the observation. Now, I wonder whether that crystal could reveal a concealed doorway." He rose and walked to the desk, running a white-gloved finger along its surface until he reached the lamp. Hastings and Japp followed, watching as Poirot gently nudged the crystal globe. At first, it rotated freely. Then he paused, angling it. A thin sliver of metal, almost imperceptible, appeared between the desk's wooden back panel and the wall. "There," Poirot exclaimed softly. "A micro-latch, releasing when the sphere turns to a certain degree. Our missing gentleman may be concealed behind this panel." Hastings crouched to examine the seam. "I see it a narrow gap, but it looks perilous to open." "Fear not," Poirot said. Producing a slender steel probe from his coat, he slipped it into the slot and pressed gently. There was a faint click, followed by a soft rumble. The back panel of the desk swung inward to reveal a dark recess barely large enough for a single person to stand. Poirot raised a lamp and shone its beam inside at first. The spotlight revealed only dusty shelving, old ledgers, typewriter ribbons, and a rolled tapestry. Then, tucked behind the tapestry, a shadow moved. A muffled gasp echoed from the cubby's depths. Hastings's eyes went wide. So there he is. The tableau that emerged was both extraordinary and heartening. Lord Ashburn himself, pale but uninjured, crouched within the cramped compartment. His suit was dusty, his tie loosened. But his eyes gleamed with gratitude when Poirot's light fell upon him. "Mon Dieu, it is you," he exclaimed weakly. "I thought by chance I would suffocate in here." Poirot offered his hand. "All is well now. Monsieur, you are safe." He turned to Hastings, fetch a blanket and water. Quickly then observe him from a distance. Hastings dashed from the library as Japp stepped to the cubby's entrance. Poirot knelt beside his friend and spoke in a low voice. "Tell me, Lord Ashburn, how came you to be hidden in this niche?" Ashburn swallowed. "I confronted Byrne last night after he poisoned Hastings. I caught him placing me here. He said it would be spotless, official. He had arranged everything, the clock, the pills. I resisted, and he shoved me in before I could react. Then he locked the desk from the outside." Poirot nodded gravely. "A cruel stratagem, and the panels released by your hand, I presume." Ashburn managed a weak smile. "After he departed to pursue the deed, I felt my chance. I remembered this lamp's odd crystal and felt it pressed at a certain angle. The air was stale, and I nearly gave into panic. But the image of my wife, our anniversary toast, drove me on." Poirot stood, cane in hand. "Bravo, monsieur. You employed your own little grey cells in the end, and now the labyrinth of this manor has been fully traversed." Inspector Japp and Hastings returned with a blanket and a glass of water. Hastings knelt to help his friend. While Japp stood watch, Poirot retrieved the desk's hermetic seal kit from a drawer and resecured the hidden panel, ensuring no further intrusion. "As for Mr. Byrne," Poirot said, addressing Japp, "he shall face justice for attempted murder, conspiracy, and abduction. But let us not overlook those who unwittingly aided him, housekeeper Dormer and Mary, who were coerced into minor roles. I recommend leniency in exchange for their full cooperation." Japp tipped his hat. "I will speak with them presently." He cast a satisfied look at the recovered. "Lord Ashburn, all is well. Thanks to you, Poirot." Hastings offered his friend the water. "Drink, sir, and rest. You are finally safe." Ashburn accepted, eyes misty. "I cannot thank you enough." "I thought I was lost to this place." Poirot inclined. His head, the veil is lifted, the shimmer revealed, and the smile's deceit laid bare. All that remains is the formal gathering where Byrne's fate is sealed, and every secret emerges into the light. As Hastings supported Lord Ashburn, and Inspector Japp fetched attendance, Poirot surveyed the library with a serene expression. The final piece had been found, the crime unravelled, and the good Captain hail again. The hidden connections, the false leads, and the dangerous diversions had led them here through the workings of psychological finesse and the smallest of clues. And in that knowledge, Poirot's little grey cell smiled in triumphant repose, ready for the grand reveal that would conclude this intricate affair at Ashburn Manor. Chapter 11. Tensions as the late morning sun had warmed the library into a pleasantly bright sanctuary, yet the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. Word of Lord Ashburn's rescue had spread swiftly, along with news of Julian Byrne's imprisonment and Simone Chantel's continued detention. The remaining household and guests gathered once more beneath the grand chandelier, some to watch the drama unfold, others to pursue their own agendas. Poirot, seated in his favourite armchair, observed the room with his customary serenity, allowing the undercurrents of emotion to surface. Captain Hastings stood near the window, noting the changing expressions on faces lined in portraiture, as though the very ancestors watched the living with approval or reproach. Inspector Japp paced lightly by the fireplace, preparing to marshal the next round of statements. Poirot cleared his throat and rang the small bell on his side table. "Amos," he called softly, "please assemble here. We shall permit honest discourse to run its course, for in the interplay of accusation and defence lies great enlightenment. Lady Chantal, draped in a crimson shawl over her genteel morning gown, rose from a side seat and swept toward the group. Dr. Mallory followed, his physician's coat replaced by a sober grey waistcoat. Mrs. Fairfax, pallid but dignified, remained near the hearth, her eyes steady. A pair of constables flanked the door, ensuring no one left unnoticed. Burn, still in handcuffs, was brought in by Jap. His once flawless suit was dishevelled, and a faint bruise on his cheek bore witness to last night's scuffle. He nodded curtly to the assembly, but said nothing. Poirot raised a slender hand. "Let us speak frankly. The events of this manner in the last 24 hours have strained trust and unearthed motives. I invite each of you to voice your observations, your suspicions, and if you dare your defences." He turned to Lady Chantal first. "Mademoiselle, you have been most vocal in accusing others. Pray, share what you have learned in detention." Simone's gaze darted to Dr. Mallory and Mrs. Fairfax in turn. Monsieur Mallory may claim remorse for his demonstration, but he withheld knowledge of my rule until after I was detained. He knew the diary pages were in the clock, yet he never told me. He sought to control both of us, and his apology rings hollow. Dr. Mallory's lips tightened. "Madam, I did not reveal everything because I feared divulging half-truths would endanger more lives. I sought only to mitigate what Burns set in motion." "And Mrs. Fairfax," Lady Chantal continued, turning with a thin smile, "you discovered the deed in the chapel archives, but you did not warn me when I confided in you my ambitions. You remained silent while I was led astray. Double quotes Mrs. Fairfax's composure flickered. She advanced a step, raising her voice. "I did not know your intent was criminal. Simone, your deceit playing upon family superstitions was beyond my suspicion. I could not protect you when I was incapacitated." She glanced at Hastings, who nodded encouragement. Then she fixed her gaze on Julian Byrne. "And you, sir, you manipulated our every move. My pendant, Chantel's artistry, Mallory's loyalty, even Hastings's hospitality. What justification do you offer now?" Burns' eyes met hers with defiance. "I offered an opportunity to claim what was rightfully mine, Ashburn's fortune and titles, yet I never intended harm. When I saw Hastings collapse, I panicked. I confess my method was ruthless, but I acted in desperation." Hastings crossed his arms. "Ruthless is an understatement. Burn, you nearly killed me with prussic acid, yet you claim desperation. Your firm was solvent. You stood to gain prestige, not survival." Burn glared. "You of all people should understand desperation, Captain. What of your own pursuit of recognition? You flaunt your captain's stripes, but envy Poirot's genius." Hastings reddened. "That is baseless." Inspector Japp intervened. "Enough, both of you. This gathering is not a battleground for personal grievances." Poirot raised a calming finger. "Precisely. Japp, let the tension surface. They serve to reveal hidden currents." He turned to Dr. Mallory. "Doctor, do you wish to respond to Madame Chantel's assertion that you withheld knowledge?" Mallory nodded. "Yes, I believe Simone was misguided but not irredeemable. I intended to guide her toward confession, but when Byrne escalated to violence, I feared revealing everything would endanger more lives." Lady Chantal snorted. "Your fear left me at Byrne's mercy." "And you," Poirot said, pivoting to Mrs. Fairfax, "you claimed ignorance of Simone's scheme. Yet only yesterday you retrieved the deed from the chapel. Double quotes Mrs. Fairfax exhaled. "I did retrieve it, but only to secure it for Lord Ashburn. I suspected Burns' involvement and wished to protect my cousin's legacy. Burns coughed. Protection, or competition. As the tension waxed, Poirot observed a subtle shift. Lady Chantel's shoulders tensed when Burns spoke. Mrs. Fairfax's gaze hardened when Mallory spoke. Mallory's mask slipped when Chantel spoke. These fractures revealed the true alliance as temporary. Uneasy and brittle, Poirot stood, cane in hand. Voice measured. Msamus, you see now how trust can fracture under deceit. But we must direct this energy toward resolution. Inspector Japp will detain Mr. Byrne for a formal charges. Madam Chantel and Dr. Mallory will remain under house supervision until legal matters conclude. He paused, letting his pronouncement sink in. Yet we must address the final piece, the motive that drove such elaborate ruses. Each of you sought advantage, whether financial, reputational, or romantic. But the true drive originated with Lord Ashburn's decision to alter his will. He looked at Lord Ashburn, seated at a small writing desk now returned to its rightful place. Ashburn nodded gravely. I intended to disinherit any who plotted against me, rewarding only those who served with honesty. That provoked you, Mr. Byrne, and indirectly all who followed his lead. Byrne's shoulders slumped. Hastings's eyes softened at Ashburn's words. Mrs. Fairfax bowed her head. Dr. Mallory exhaled, and Lady Chantel's gaze turned inward. Poirot smiled gently. And so, the tensions unleashed by our staged rest, our false leads, and our revelations have served their purpose, to expose desires, alliances, and fears as the final act approaches. We shall see how each reacts to the ultimate outcome. He turned to Inspector Japp. Please escort Mr. Byrne to his quarters. And Hastings, kindly escort Simone Chantel and Dr. Mallory to the East Wing quiet quarters, where they may await summons. As the constables moved in, the suspects filed out. Casting one last glance at the library's illuminated center, Poirot rose and turned to Lord Ashburn and Hastings. Now, Msamus, we have paved the way for confrontation. The stage is set. Soon, we shall call all to the grand hall to hear the reading of the will, the fates of each, and the final reckoning of this affair at Ashburn Manor. Hastings offered his arm to Ashburn, and they departed, leaving Poirot and Japp amid the silent rows of books. The librarian's clock ticked on, echoing the promise that, in time, every tension would find its resolution. Chapter 12. The Confrontation's Grand Hall of Ashburn Manor. Once the scene of jubilant celebration, now bore an air of solemn expectancy. The long oak table, cleared of tea and documents, was draped in a pristine white cloth. Candles flickered in ornate sconces along the walls. Casting dancing shadows across the assembled company, Lord Ashburn and Captain Hastings stood. Near the days, Inspector Japp maintained a discreet presence by the door, and between two stately columns, the four principal suspects: Simone Chantel, Dr. Edwin Mallory, Mrs. Marian Fairfax, and Mr. Julian Byrne stood in silence, guarded yet attentive. At the head of the table, Hercule Poirot stepped forward, cane in hand, his posture the very picture of composed authority. He surveyed the circle with an almost imperceptible smile. Msamus, he began, voice rich with quiet assurance. Tonight we reach a crucial moment. We have unmasked the architect of deceit, Monsieur Byrne, and yet there remain questions of motive and method that require clarification. It is here, before all of you, that we shall apply the final measure of psychological scrutiny. Byrne shifted, hands clasped behind his back, face pale. Simone Chantel met his gaze with narrowed eyes. Dr. Mallory's lips were pressed in a thin line. Mrs. Fairfax's composure was resolute. Poirot continued, directing his remarks first to Chantel and Mallory. You, Mademoiselle Chantel, claimed that Dr. Mary withheld vital information about the diary's hiding place. Yet, when I pressed him last evening, he revealed that it was at your urging he manipulated housekeeper Dormer to open the clock panel, and you, Dr. Mary, confessed to a demonstration that nearly killed Captain Hastings. Both actions sprang from an allegiance to Monsieur Burns' design. He paused, letting the implication settle. Simultaneously, he produced a small fragments the wax seal from the diary box and a scrap of parchment from the invisible ink note and laid them before Burn. Yet the puzzle was never simply about the sapphires or the cursed family heirlooms. It was about a single, unbroken thread of knowledge, the existence of this secret panel behind Lord Ashburn's desk. Burn swallowed. Hastings noticed the tremor in his jaw. Mrs. Fairfax's hand tightened on her shawl, and Chantel's breathing quickened. Poirot's gaze fixed on Burn. You alone knew of that mechanism from your legal visits to the estate. Archives, where detailed floor plans revealed secret passages. You orchestrated my rival at the desk lamp's positioning, knowing I would observe the crystals or refraction. You counted on me to discover the panel. Burn's lips parted, as if to speak, then closed. Poirot nodded too. Hastings, who placed the final diary page on the table, the missing leaf naming the heir whom Ashburn intended to favor. And here, Poirot said, we have the culmination of his testament written on this final page. It names you, Mr. Burn, as the intended executor of his revised will, contingent upon your proof of loyalty. But you betrayed him by seeking to eliminate Captain Hastings and frame his own family. Burn's voice trembled. Monsieur Poirot, I loved him as one loves a benefactor, to protect that legacy. I thought to secure the deed and the will. I never intended to harm him grievously. You intended to harm grievously, Poirot. Corrected gently. Prussic acid in Hastings's tea, that was your demonstration of control. But you made a critical error. He turned to Mrs. Fairfax and held up the scrap of parchment. You will recall this phrase, beware the hand that feigns help. In your note you concealed a third line when you did not show me until the diary page arrived. It read, only a fool trusts the light behind his own lamp. Burns' eyes widened. He stepped forward, voice cracking. Where did you find that? On the flap of the gift box that once rested on the blotter. Poirot replied, you wrote it in invisible ink to warn your accomplices, not me. But that phrase named the lamp itself, the very device you believed would shield the secret. You assumed I would not suspect its significance. Yet I did. Burns' shoulders sagged. He glanced at the lamp, then at the crystal globe now inert in Poirot's hand. I thought the prismatic shimmer would distract you, that you would not notice the micro-latch. But the shimmer betrayed you, Poirot said softly. You overlooked the simplest truth. The culprit often underestimates the detective's vision. He let that sink in, then addressed the others. Now, Mr. Burn, reveal to us how you intended to retrieve the diary pages from the panel without risk of detection. Burns' breath came in ragged gasps. I planned to wait until midnight, when the household slept, then open the panel, remove the pages, and consult the final will. But when I saw Poirot advancing upon my scheme, when I saw him stomping toward the desk after Hastings's collapse, I picked. I forced Lord Ashburn into the panel to delay his rescue. Doctor, Mallory's face paled. You involved me by suggesting a simple test of the tea. Burn cut him off. I used you as proof that the family was vulnerable. I thought if I showed how easily death could come, the family and Lord Ashburn would yield to my terms. Simone. Chantal made a small, incredulous laugh. You nearly destroyed us all, monsieur. And for what? A few legal privileges. Burn turned on her. You would have taken everything for your art and your affectations. I thought maker women would be swayed by fear. Mrs. Fairfax stepped forward. Monsieur Byrne, you valued prestige over humanity. You would have sacrificed your host and his friends to secure a title. Byrne bowed his head. I see now that fear is a poor foundation for loyalty. Poirot held up a hand. Enough. The confession is complete. Inspector Jupp, you will remove Mr. Byrne to the county gaol. To answer for attempted murder, conspiracy, and abduction, Jupp signaled the constables, who stepped forward to place Byrne in custody. As they led him away, his gaze met Poirot's, filled with a mixture of shame and relief. Poirot turned to the remaining 3 guests. Mesdames et messieurs, I commend your courage in facing truths that would rather remain hidden. You have been tested by despair, yet you endured without betraying your deep honor. Mrs. Fairfax inclined her head. Dr. Mallory and Lady Chantal exchanged tentative glances. Poirot offered each a cool nod. Now, we will repair the scars of this affair and restore the grace of Ashbourne Manor. He motioned for the candles to be dimmed. The company dispersed quietly, leaving Poirot, Lord Ashbourne, and Hastings alone in the glowing half-light. Hastings exhaled. Sir, the confrontation was masterfully wrought. Byrne's confession. Poirot placed a comforting hand on Hastings's shoulder. Mon capitaine. The true art of detection lies not only in unmasking the deed, but in guiding the culprit to reveal himself, and tonight that art was fulfilled. Lord Ashbourne stepped forward, gratitude shining in his eyes. Hercule, I owe you more than words can express. You have saved not only my life, but the dignity of all present. Poirot's moustache twitched in pleasure. It was my honor, monsieur, and now let us proceed to the next chapter where justice is served, and the ties of trust are restored at last. Chapter 13. A desperate attempt to escape night had fallen. Once more over Ashbourne Manor, and an uneasy hush settled over its corridors, the grand hall, now cleared of wax tables and flickering torches, lay dark and silent save for the distant tolling of the grandfather clock, a steady reminder that time, like justice, would not be delayed. In the east wing, behind locked doors guarded by 2 constables, Simone Chantal, Dr. Mallory, and Mrs. Fairfax awaited the dawn's reckoning, yet not all slumbered in the dim corridor outside. Captain Hastings and Inspector Jupp exchanged low words beneath a single lantern's glow. We must remain vigilant. Hastings whispered. Miss Chantal was desperate in the confrontation. She may attempt something rash. Jupp nodded. And Mallory's allegiance wavered. But the lady in grey seems least likely to flee. Her calm is genuine. We'll watch them all. Behind them, the corridor's silence was punctuated by the distant creak of floorboards, an unexpected sound in a hall where every servant knew to tread lightly by night. Both men stiffened. Who's there? Jupp barked, raising his lantern. No. Answer came. Just the echo of footfalls receding into the darkness. Stay here. Jupp ordered Hastings and stepped forward toward the distant sound. Hastings gripped his revolver anxiously, heart thumping as he followed. The servants' wing, normally disused after curfew, felt oppressive at night. Doors to storage closets and former pantries lined the narrow passage. At the far end, a heavy service door led to the external courtyard. Jupp and Hastings moved swiftly, lantern in one hand and weapon in the other, guided by the soft shuffle of someone's hurried steps. They rounded a corner into a small lobby. There they spied Simone Chantal, her silk shawl pulled at her feet, hair unpinned, trembling as she struggled with a tarnished master key she had snatched from one of the constables. The key's teeth scraped against the lock of the service. Door, stop. Madam Chantal, Jupp called, raising his lantern high. Hastings advanced, revolver trained. Chantal froze, key halfway in the lock, her eyes wide with fear and determination. Met theirs. "You can't do this to me," she cried, voice breaking. "I will not be judged on half-truths and childish machinations." Hastings sprang forward. "Put down that key." Before she could reply, the lock clicked and the heavy door creaked inward. A gust of cool night air swept into the lobby, ruffling Chantel's shawl. She turned, eyes darting between Japp and Hastings, and made a desperate dash toward the courtyard. Japp swung his arm to block her, but Chantel ducked under his grasp and bolted through the doorway. Hastings fired a warning shot into the air. The sharp report echoed off stone walls. "Freeze!" Hastings shouted, adrenaline coursing. "Don't make me shoot." Chantel skidded to a halt on the flagstones of the courtyard, staring at the manor's ornate iron gates locked, but within reach of her outstretched hand. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Inspector Japp emerged onto the courtyard, lantern raised. "Simone Chantel, you will come back inside at once." Chantel shook her head, tears glinting in her eyes. "No, I won't let them let him." She brandished the master key. "I need to find that will. I need to destroy it before they exile me forever." Hastings and Japp exchanged a glance. Japp's voice softened. "Madam, you misunderstand. The will was read aloud last night by Lord Ashburn himself. Your chance to influence it has passed. There is nothing left to destroy." Chantel's shoulders trembled as realization dawned. She looked down at the key in her hand, at the cold gate beyond, then closed her eyes. I don't belong at Ashburn Manor anymore," she whispered, voice thick with despair. I thought prestige would fill the emptiness in me." Hastings lowered his revolver. "Madam Chantel, you almost killed Captain Hastings. You conspired with Byrne. You tried to poison and to abduct. But we do not seek to see you fall. Return with us, and you will answer for your actions, but there will be mercy if you confess fully." A single sob escaped Chantel's lips. She dropped the key, and it clattered against the stone. Japp picked it up and pocketed it. Chantel sank to her knees, head bowed. I'm sorry. I never meant for anyone to get hurt except him," she whispered, nodding toward the manor doors. "I wanted his respect. Not this ruin." Hastings knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Tell us everything." "Madam Chantel, honesty now is your only freedom." She exhaled shakily, forcing herself upright. "I didn't kill Lord Ashburn, but I set the pieces in motion. Byrne promised to share the inheritance, but I didn't realize what I'd unleashed. When Hastings was poisoned, I knew it had gone too far." Inspector Japp crouched before her. "You acted out of vanity and desperation, but you have the choice to face the consequences with dignity. Will you return?" Chantel rose slowly, shoulders slumped. She nodded. "Yes, I'll come back." Moments later, the three returned to the library's antechamber, where Mary and two constables awaited. Chantel passed them quietly, tears still glistening, then entered the main hall where Hastings and Japp awaited her deposition. The locked doors were closed behind her, and the courtyard's chill receded. Inside, Lord Ashburn, seated at his writing desk, looked up from reviewing his will's transcript. He rose when he saw Chantel, his expression calm yet grave. "Simone," he said softly, "you need not fear. All is revealed now. The true culprit is confined, and no further harm can be done." Chantel knelt before him, voice barely audible. "My lord, I beg your forgiveness. I sought what was not mine, and in doing so, I endangered your life and that of your friends." Ashburn regarded her with quiet compassion. "You have suffered remorse, and you have come back to face the truth. That is courage. Rest assured that my final wishes, now fully known, including provisions from mercy, shall guide the judgment of your fate." Chantel exhaled, hope mingling with her shame. Hastings stood behind her, supportive. While Inspector Japp prepared to record her full confession, Poirot entered then, cane tapping lightly against the marble floor. His presence seemed to steady the room. "Monsieur, Madame, I trust the late hour's excitement has been resolved." Ashburn inclined his head. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot. There will be no further attempts at flight." Poirot's eyes found Chantel's, then softened. "And you, Madame, have shown the greatest courage of all, the courage to turn from darkness and accept accountability." He turned to Japp. "Let us conclude this chapter of our investigation, though its repercussions will echo long after. Tonight, as the manor's great clock chimed midnight, Simone Chantal prepared to unburden her soul in full confession. And the shadows that once threatened to engulf Ashburn Manor receded before the steady glow of truth and contrition. The desperate attempt had failed. The evidence remained intact. And the final gathering of justice drew near. Chapter 14. The final piece falls into Placide dawn's pale light crept through the leaded W. Windows of Ashburn Manor, Learninger. Library, a tranquil air that belied the storm of revelations within its walls. In the center of the room, Hercule Poirot stood before the long oak table, now cleared of yesterday's evidence, save for a single item on a velvet cushion, the original blotter. With its invisible ink message fully revealed, surrounding him were Lord Ashburn, Captain Hastings, Inspector Japp, Mrs. Miriam Fairfax, Dr. Edwin Mallory, and Simone Chantal. Each bore the marks of recent trials, fatigue, relief, or lingering guilt as they awaited the final resolution. Poirot's black eyes, bright with purpose, travelled over the group. "Ms. Amos, we have exposed the architect of this terrible affair, recovered our missing host, and brought confessions from every quarter. Yet there remains one query unanswered. Why did Lord Ashburn entrust his destiny to the tumble of invisible ink rather than a simple letter? What deeper test lay hidden in that acid-stained note?" He paused, lifting the blotter to the light. The two lines gleamed. "The truth is veiled by those who trust." "Seek the shimmer behind the smile." Hastings frowned. "We interpreted the shimmer as the crystal lamp, then the sapphires, only to find both misleading. But why phrase it so enigmatically?" Poirot replaced the blotter on its cushion and tapped it gently. "Because," moaned Capitaine, "the acid wash not only revealed the warning, but also partially dissolved the next line, one that was never discovered until now." He produced a slender magnifying glass, placing it over the blotter's surface, under his scrutiny. A third line shimmered faintly beneath the two visible verses, and heed the hand that turns the page. Gasps rippled through the assembled listeners. Mrs. Fairfax's hand flew to her throat in astonishment. Dr. Mallory's eyebrows climbed. Chantal pressed her lips together. Hastings leaned forward. "Turns the page," Hastings echoed. "But what page?" "The diary pages were our prize. Yet we never paused to observe how they were handled." Poirot nodded. "That is the final piece, Ms. in the frenzy of our search. We overlooked how the diary pages were stored and who had the opportunity to move them. The note warned not only of false friends, but also of the very hands that might shield or reveal the truth." He beckoned to Inspector Japp, who retrieved the small wooden casket containing the sapphire earrings and diary pages. Poirot lifted each page carefully, watching the light catch the torn edges. On the outer margin of one leaf, merely invisible, and less angled precisely, was a fingerprint smeared yet distinct. "Notice," Poirot said, pointing to the smudge, "this partial print. It matches not Dr. Mallory's broad finger, nor Lord Ashburn's own, but a smaller, more delicate hand Mary's." He turned to the maid, who stood near the door, cheeks flushed and eyes wide. "Mary, step forward, s'il vous plaît." The young maid advanced. Glancing at the crumpled fingerprint, Japp produced a small inkwell and rolled Mary's fingertip with gentle respect. He then compared the fresh print to the blotter's margin. "It is hers," Japp confirmed. Mary bowed. "Her head, Monsieur Poirot. I am so sorry. I never meant to deceive. When Mr. Byrne imprisoned Lord Ashburn, he said to hide the pages after the first hiding place was discovered. He told me to take them from the casket and slip them into the blotter's pages, so that no one would find them. A collective." Murmur rose. Chantelle's face paled. Dr. Mary steeled himself. Mrs. Fairfax's hand trembled on the back of a chair. Poirot stepped forward, addressing Mary with kindness. "Child, you acted under duress, yet your obedience nearly prolonged this affair indefinitely. It was only when I noticed that the gift box's seal and the blotter's watermark did not perfectly align that I suspected a secondary concealment, a misplacement of evidence." He faced the group. "Byrne exploited Mary's loyalty, using her small hands to move the diary pages from the secret panel into a location he believed safe, the pages of the blotter itself. He presumed no one would tear apart a blotter to find pages of writing. But the acid-wash dissolved enough pulp to reveal the marginal smudge when examined closely. Hastings held up the blotter cover. Answer, the true test was here all along, not simply to seek the shimmer behind the smile, but to heed the hand that turns the page to see who manipulated the written word itself. Lord Ashburn, seated at his restored desk, spoke quietly. "Monsieur Poirot, I intended this final twist as a measure of true loyalty. I knew that many would confess to deceit under pressure, but only one would be compelled to hide evidence. In the most unassuming place. Mary, you showed courage in telling us the truth." Mary blinked back tears. "Thank you, my lord. I only did as I was told. But I should have confessed sooner." Dr. Mary stepped forward. "I, too, apologize. For my part, my arrogance in testing Captain Hastings, and my silence when I first knew of Mary's removal of the pages." Simone Chantelle and Mrs. Fairfax exchanged a glance. Then each gave a slight bow of contrition. Hastings placed a supportive hand on Mary's shoulder as Poirot concluded the revelation. "Summers, the final piece has fallen into place. We see now how trust was twisted. Byrne's deception of Christine, Chantelle's misdirection, Mallory's misguided loyalty, Fairfax's protective silence, and young Mary's dutiful concealment. Yet through observation, we have restored every fragment of truth." Inspector Japp retrieved the remaining diary pages from the blotter and returned them to their casket. Poirot replaced the blotter and the casket on the table in neat alignment. He turned to Lord Ashburn. "Monsieur, your design has been honored. The visible clues led us astray. Yet the hidden smear of Mary's fingerprint and the acid-washed words directed us to the heart of the matter. All that remains is the consummation of justice and mercy." Ashburn rose, addressing his assembled guests and staff with dignified warmth. "Let this day mark both an end and a beginning, the end of betrayal, the beginning of restored trust, and as for each of you, I hope you find peace in the knowledge of your own truths." Poirot offered his final words, and now, Mzamas, we prepare for the final gathering, where every confession has been made, every shadow dispelled, and every secret laid bare, here at Ashburn Manor. We have learned that the smallest clue and the smallest hand can change the course of justice. Chapter 15. The final gathering. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the mullioned windows of the grand hall, casting long, golden shafts across the polished oak floor. Lord Ashburn, Captain Hastings, Inspector Japp, and Hercule Poirot stood beneath the vaulted ceiling, awaiting the arrival of the remaining participants. A single long table, draped in white linen, bore only a crystal decanter of water and several glasses, symbols of calm and clarity before the storm of truth, one by one. The assembled company entered in silence. First came Mrs. Marianne Fairfax. Her composure restored, though her eyes remained watchful. Dr. Edwin Malley followed, bearing the gravity of his errors, but standing with measured dignity. Simone Chantal entered next, head bowed but shoulders squared in acceptance of her fate. Lastly, Mary, the maid, appeared vase-pale, yet steadier now that her secret had been laid bare. Each found a place along a single bench on one side of the table, facing Poirot Dot as the last footstep echoed. Poirot raised his cane and addressed them in a voice both gentle and commanding. "Msamas, we gather at the culmination of a most extraordinary affair, over many nights and days. Each of you has played a part, some knowingly, some unwittingly, in a drama of hidden wills. Invisible ink and near-fatal poisonings tonight. We shall reconstruct the sequence of events, so that every detail, every motive, and every action finds its proper place." He paused and swept his gaze across the faces before him. "Lord Ashburn, you will begin with the evening of your silver anniversary. Please recount for us, in brief, how you first discovered the missing gift and the invisible ink note." Lord Ashburn stepped forward. "I excused myself briefly to fetch Lady Ashburn's present. When I returned, I found my study door ajar and a cryptic card on my blotter. I sensed at once that something was amiss." Poirot nodded, unfurling a tidy scroll. "Very good. Next, Captain Hastings, you assisted in examining the scene. Describe what you observed at that moment." Hastings advanced, glancing briefly at Mary, then nodded. "I noted the ink bottle was missing, and I saw a faint scuff by the window suggesting someone lingered there. We found Lady Chantal's card in the blotter, though we did not yet know its true importance." "Excellent," Poirot said. "Inspector Jupp, you then coordinated the initial search of the grounds and questioned the staff. At what point did you realize this was no simple disappearance?" Inspector Jupp cleared his throat. "When I discovered that Lord Ashburn's car remained untouched, and no footprints led from the hall, I surmised the culprit remained inside. That is when I requested that no one leave the premises." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Indeed. Madame Chantal, you then volunteered to examine the study again, and I interviewed you about your letters. What did you hope to reveal?" Simone Chantal looked up, voice unsteady but clear. "I wished to show that Lord Ashburn sent poetic warnings, murmurs of unseen threats. I thought it proved he believed someone close was plotting against him." Poirot inclined his head. "And Dr. Malley, you confirmed Lord Ashburn's anxieties, yet withheld certain details. You later admitted to testing me with prussic acid in Hastings's tea. Why?" Dr. Malley clasped his hands. "I believed showing the ease of poisoning would galvanize the household to remain vigilant. I meant it as a lesson, not a threat, a risky lesson." Poirot observed softly. "Mrs. Fairfax, you retrieved the lost deed from the chapel archives and concealed the sapphire earrings in the clock panel. What was your intention?" Mrs. Fairfax drew a steady breath. "I wished to protect my cousin's inheritance from those who would exploit it. I feared that Burns' legal maneuvering would override his wishes, so I secured the deed until the truth emerged." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And Mary, you were compelled by Burn to move the diary pages from the panel into the blotter itself. You acted out of loyalty, but you later confessed under duress. Why did Burn choose you for this task?" Mary trembled but spoke bravely. "He said no one would think to inspect a common blotter. I was frightened. I thought it was a simple errand." Hastings placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Poirot then addressed the group as a whole. "Now, Msamas, observe how each action led to the next. The card in invisible ink prompted for the concealment. The missing ink bottle and scuff suggested an inside job. The secret panel yielded the diary. The blotter swallowed the evidence once more. The poisoning nearly killed Hastings, and all the while Mary's small hand turned the pages out of sight. Yet each concealing act also served as a signpost. Awaiting the careful eye, he tapped the blotter gently. I remind you of the note's final line, and heed the hand that turns the page. Only by recognizing that instruction could the true hiding place and the true sequence be uncovered. Dr. Mary sighed. We were so intent on finding the culprit that we missed the paper itself crying out for inspection. Lord Ashburn placed a hand on Mary's shoulder. Your intent was noble. Even if misguided, Poirot motioned to Jap, who retrieved a folded paper, the restored will, now complete with every annotated change. Jap handed it to Ashburn, who read it aloud in clear, resonant tones. I leave my estate, in equal parts, to those who acted with honesty and compassion, to my wife, my loyal friends, and those who guided me without deception, to the betrayer. Mr. Byrne, I bequeath only the knowledge that trust once lost may never be regained. At the final word, a hush fell. Simone Chantal looked down, tears glinting. Mrs. Fairfax exhaled in relief. Mary's chin trembled. Dr. Mary's remorse was plain. Poirot closed the will and set it aside. Thus, justice is served by your own words, monsieur. And now, as we prepare the final reveal, remember that it is not simply the detection of crime, but the restoration of harmony that lies at the heart of Agatha Christie's tradition. He stepped back, allowing the assembled company a moment to absorb the significance of the reading. Captain Hastings, standing beside his friend, nodded approvingly. Poirot then raised his cane and addressed them one final time before the reveal. In 1 hour's time, we shall gather here once more to bid farewell to this chapter of Ashburn Manor's history. Until then, I encourage you to reflect on the lessons learned, that the shimmer of jewels can blind, that the hand that feigns help can betray, and that the true measure of one's character emerges when the final page is turned. With that, Poirot tapped his cane on the floor, signaling the close of the final gathering and interlude of calm before the crescendo of the reveal in the chapters to come. Chapter 16, the reveal's grand hall lay hushed in the golden half-light of evening, is the final. Out approached, Lord Ashburn, graceful and composed, had taken his place at the head of the table. Beside him, Captain Hastings stood watchful, while Inspector Japp remained at the door, prepared to escort any who required further questioning. Across the table, Saturday Mrs. Miriam Fairfax, Dr. Edwin Mary, Simone Chantal, and Mary the maid, each marked by the events that had transpired. And at the centre, with his little grey cells fully engaged, stood Hercule Poirot, ready to draw aside the last veil of deception. Poirot tapped his cane once upon the polished floor. Samus. The time has come for the grand reveal where every strand of this complex tapestry is laid bare. We begin with the invisible ink note, which read in full, "The truth is veiled by those you trust. Seek the shimmer behind the smile, and heed the hand that turns the page." He held out the blotter card. These lines were designed not only to warn, but to mislead and to guide the observant to the key hiding place. He placed the card upon the table and turned to Mrs. Fairfax. "You believed the shimmer referred to your sapphire pendant, and thus you led us to the clock panel, where the earrings and diary pages first lay hidden. Your motive, madam, was to protect your cousin's inheritance, and for that intent I commend you, though your secrecy delayed our efforts." Mrs. Fairfax inclined her head. Poirot shifted his gaze to Simone Chantal. "Mademoiselle, you seized upon the legend of the cursed sapphires to frame Mrs. Fairfax. You manipulated Dr. Mary by sharing Lady Ashburn's poetic letters, suggesting an unseen threat. Your artistic sensibilities gave you access to the chapel archives, where you annotated the ledger to mark opportunities for clandestine entries. Yet your hand trembled when confronted with the diary's truth, and in desperation you attempted to flee. Simone's eyes glistened with contrition. "Doctor," Poirot continued, turning to Mallory, "you believed a demonstration of prussic acid would galvanize vigilance. You tested Captain Hastings's tea, exposing the household to peril. You withheld knowledge of Mary's concealment of diary pages within the blotter, hoping to guide revelations at your own pace. Your devotion to Lord Ashbourne was admirable, but your methods endangered innocent lives." Dr. Mallory bowed his head. "Mary," Poirot said gently, "you did not act of your own ambition, but under Burne's coercion. You removed the pages from the secret panel and slipped them into the blotter, believing no one would suspect a humble maid. Your fingerprints on the margins betrayed the final hiding place, and your courage in confessing freed us from the last shroud of illusion." Mary's cheeks flushed, but she lifted her chin. Poirot then raised his voice slightly, and finally, "Monsieur Julian Burne, our principal architect, you alone knew of the hidden desk panel from your perusal of floor plans. You orchestrated every diversion, the invisible ink messages to misdirect, the poisoned tea to eliminate an obstacle, the theft of ink bottle and sapphire earrings to distract suspicion, and the imprisonment of Lord Ashbourne to seize the deed and the will. Your aim was to secure the estate by fear and manipulation. Yet you overlooked one vital factor: the detective's capacity to follow the smallest shimmer, to heed the faintest fingerprint. Burne, seated under guard, met Poirot's gaze with a mixture of shame and resignation. Poirot stepped forward and tapped the crystal lamp's globe. "Here, beneath the innocent guise of a reading light, you hid the very mechanism that concealed your victim. But when I observed the prism's peculiar refraction, I knew the lamp itself would betray its secret, and so it did." He turned once more to Lord Ashbourne. "Monsieur, with all elements of your plan now revealed, you may address the fate of those involved." Ashbourne rose, voice firm yet forgiving. "Simone, Dr. Mallory, and Mary have each played their parts under varying degrees of compulsion or error. I shall petition the court for clemency on their behalf, recognizing remorse and circumstance. But for Julian Burne, the law must take its due course." He looked to Burne. "Your ambition cost lives and nearly destroyed this home. May you find atonement through your punishment." Burne lowered his eyes, accepting his sentence in silence. Poirot gave a final nod. "Thus concludes our grand reveal. The invisible ink note, the secret panel, the poisoned tea, the hidden deed, and the fingerprint in the blotter, all clues converge to unravel a scheme of greed and betrayal, yet through observation, compassion, and unrelenting logic. We have restored both truth and harmony." He tipped his hat to the assembled company. "Msamus, thank you for your cooperation in this most singular affair. May Ashbourne Manor know brighter days ahead." A hush fell as each person reflected on the intricate dance of deceit and detection. Outside, the manor's grounds lay quiet beneath a silver moon. Inside, hearts had been tested and trust reforged, and in the subtle glow of the crystal lamp, Poirot's little grey cells rested, content that once more justice had been served. Chapter 17. Outcome and Justice's candles in the grand hall flickered softly as the final formalities of the evening began. Lord Ashbourne, seated at his restored desk, presided over the gathering with the serene composure of a host who had survived both peril and betrayal. Captain Hastings stood at his side, offering quiet support, while Inspector Japp prepared to document the resolutions of the case. Hercule Poirot remained near the crystal lamp, its prism now silent witness to the saga's end. Poirot spoke first, his voice calm yet unwavering. "Msamus, the threads of this intricate tapestry have been woven into a clear pattern. The guilty have been identified. their motives exposed, and each has faced the consequences of their actions. Now, as we draw this affair to a close, we must ensure that justice is truly served and that the innocent find restoration. He turned to Inspector Japp. Monsieur Japp, please proceed with the official record of charges and dispositions. Inspector Japp nodded and addressed the assembly in his crisp, authoritative tone. Julian Byrne is charged with conspiracy to commit abduction, attempted murder by poisoning, and conspiracy to defraud. He will be remanded to the county gaol, pending trial at the Central Assizes. Simone Chantal, the complicit in framing and attempted escape, will be offered leniency in exchange for her full cooperation and testimony against Byrne. She is charged with conspiracy to defraud and obstruction of justice. Dr. Edwin Mallory is charged with reckless endangerment and unlawful use of a controlled substance. Owing to his medical service and immediate cooperation, he will face disciplinary review but no criminal prosecution. Mary, the maid, will not face charges, given her duress and prompt confession. She will remain in the household's employ under Lord Ashburn's protection. Mrs. Marianne Fairfax faces no charges, her sole actions motivated by protective intent and ultimately confessed. A murmur of assent passed through the audience. Mrs. Fairfax inclined her head in gratitude. Dr. Mallory exhaled in relief. Chantal lowered her eyes, but did not protest. Mary, standing near the door, breathed more freely now that her ordeal was acknowledged. Lord Ashburn rose and spoke, voice rich with both gravity and compassion. We have witnessed how easy it is for trust to fracture and for ambition to darken the noblest intentions. Yet we have also seen courage, loyalty, and the redemptive power of truth. To that end, I shall take the following actions. Byrne's estate rights. All claims by Mr. Byrne on my properties and titles are revoked. His legal standing will be forfeited as the court deems appropriate. Chantal's commission, in light of Simone's remorse and her artistic talent. She will be commissioned to paint a series of portraits commemorating this man's history, provided she remains under the watchful eyes of Lord and Lady Ashby. Mallory's practice. Dr. Mallory will continue his medical duties here with oversight. His good standing restored upon completion of a probationary period and community service in the village infirmary. Mary's future. Mary shall receive a position of trust within the household as an archivist's assistant, ensuring that no documents are ever again concealed or lost. Fairfax's role. Mrs. Fairfax will serve as family counsel, advising on estate matters with an open and honest hand. As he spoke, Hastings discreetly handed Mary a small slip of parchment, her formal appointment letter signed by Lord Ashburn himself. The maid's eyes filled with gratitude, and she pressed the parchment to her chest. Poirot stepped forward, allowing the master of the house his final word. These measures embody not only justice, but also mercy, recognizing both the gravity of betrayal and the capacity for redemption. I commend your wisdom, monsieur. With the formal resolutions addressed, Poirot continued, turning to the remaining guests. Before we disperse, allow me a moment to reflect on the lessons of this affair. Observation over assumption. Every clue, no matter how hidden, awaits the steady gaze of the detective. Truth beneath artifice, invisible ink, prisms, and fingerprints all conspired to conceal and reveal. Trust must be balanced with vigilance. Mercy and justice. Accountability must be tempered by compassion, lest we lose our humanity in the pursuit of order. In that spirit, I shall take my leave, trusting that Ashburn Manor will flourish once more in harmony and trust. May its halls echo with laughter rather than fear. He inclined his head and, with the quiet dignity of a gentleman detective, departed through the side door. Captain Hastings followed, with Lord Ashburn pausing to clasp Hastings's shoulder in silent thanks. Inspector Japp lingered, To finalize, the nightly log. While the others quietly drifted from the hall to rest and to contemplate the morrow, epilogue we a week later. The sun shone brightly upon Ashburn Manor's gardens. Portraits by Simone Chantal, each capturing a moment of the manor's storied past, hung in the gallery. Dr. Mary tended kindly to villagers at the infirmary, earning renewed respect. Mary, now archivist's assistant, carefully catalogued documents by candlelight, ensuring no secret remained concealed. Mrs. Fairfax consulted amicably with Lord Ashburn on estate matters, while Captain Hastings accompanied his friend on a leisurely stroll, their laughter rippling through the hedged walkways dot in a quiet corner of the gallery. A single blotter card and crystal lamp were displayed behind glass, as testaments to the strange and extraordinary affair they had survived. And there, at the heart of the manor, Agatha Christie's spirit lived on, reminding all who passed that the keenest eyes and the kindest hearts hold the true power to unveil darkness and restore light. Chapter 18. The closing remark a gentle hush fell over Ashburn Manor as the last candle flickered low in the grand gallery. The assembled portraits Lady Victoria's solemn gaze, Lord Ashburn's youthful smile, and the proud countenances of generations past observed the final participants of this peculiar drama. It was here, amid the echo of history and beneath the soft glow of the crystal lamp, that Hercule Poirot prepared to speak the words that would bring this extraordinary affair to its close. Captain Hastings stood beside him, polished boots resting on the oriental carpet, while Lord and Lady Ashburn shared a quiet glance, their hands joined in reassurance. Mrs. Marian Fairfax, Dr. Edwin Mallory, Simone Chantal, and Mary gathered respectfully by the embroidered settee, their roles in the narrative complete. Even Inspector Japp lingered at the doorway, notebook clasped in hand. Awaiting the detective's final observations, Poirot cleared his throat gently. His little grey cells now content that every twist had been untangled. He raised one slender hand, gesturing toward the array of artifacts displayed on a small mahogany table. The acid-stained blotter card, the ruby-hued diary pages, the crystal lamp once concealing a secret latch, and the mahogany box that had both imprisoned and preserved Lord Ashburn. Each object bore witness to a chapter of deception and revelation. Msamas, Poirot began, voice rich with warmth and subtle triumph. We have traversed a labyrinth of invisible ink and poisoned tea, of hidden compartments and trembling loyalties. Yet through it all, one truth has shone brighter than any gem, that the human heart, in its frailty and its courage, is the ultimate riddle to be solved. He paused to allow the weight of his words to settle. Lady Ashburn, seated on an armchair, upholstered in emerald velvet, offered her husband a small, reassuring smile. Hastings tapped his foot lightly, a grin tugging at his lips. Even Burns' empty seat, now removed to Justice's custody, seemed to loom as a reminder of ambitions, peril. Poirot continued, addressing each element in turn. Consider the invisible ink note, a poetic warning that directed us first to the shimmer of sapphires, then to the glimmer of crystal, and finally to the fingerprint smudged in the margin. In its layered misdirection, it taught us that clues may beguile as much as they reveal, and that the keenest observation lies in knowing what is unseen. He turned to the crystal lamp, its globe now resting atop a satin cushion, this humble fixture, placed for study and illumination, concealed a secret latch known only to those who scrutinized every prism of light. So often, the most mundane object may veil the grandest mystery. Poirot's gaze shifted to the blotter card, still bearing the acid's telltale stains. The blotter itself nearly swallowed the diary's final pages. Yet the faintest smear single fingerprint betrayed the hand that turned its leaves. Thus, we are reminded, even the smallest act, performed in service of concealment, can be the key that unlocks all. He allowed himself a rare chuckle. And let us not forget the prussic acid deadly in its swift embrace used in a so-called demonstration of caution, which nearly cost Captain Hastings his life. Even in tragedy, there is a lesson. That knowledge without wisdom is a blade that cuts both wielder and victim. A soft murmur of agreement rose. Hastings sighed theatrically. Lesson learned. Monsieur Poirot, though I confess I hope never to learn it anew. Poirot inclined his head. The true lesson, Samus, is that human nature is a tapestry woven of both light and shadow. Deceit may twist its threads, but in the end, the tapestry is whole only when every strand honest and duplicitous alike is revealed. He stepped forward and addressed Lord Ashburn directly. Monsieur, your decision to entrust your final wishes to such a convoluted test was bold, yet it has yielded not only the culprit, but also a reaffirmation of loyalty and courage among your household. Your mercy, tempered by justice, shall stand as a beacon for all who follow in your footsteps. Lord Ashburn rose, his voice steady. Hercule, I cannot imagine a more fitting conclusion. You have not only preserved my life and legacy, but also shown us that compassion must guide our judgments. For that, I am forever grateful. Poirot bowed deeply. It was my honor, monsieur. And now, if I may offer one final observation, a society that honors both the intellect and the heart, that tempers justice with mercy, will flourish in ways even the keenest detective cannot foresee. He turned to Sokolov. Witnesses Mrs. Fairfax, Dr. Mallory, Simone Chantal, and Mary. You have each borne your trials with dignity. May the future grant you redemption or reward, according to the measure of your contrition and your courage. Mary, tears bright in her eyes, whispered, Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I shall serve truth hereafter, always. Simone nodded, voice trembling. Your faith in me, even now, gives me hope I did not deserve. Dr. Mallory offered a small bow. I have learned that knowledge without empathy is folly. I shall serve both. Mrs. Fairfax smiled softly. I shall counsel with honesty, remembering the pain that secrecy wrought. Poirot's eyes twinkled as he surveyed them, and now, Samus, my journey nears its end. I shall take my leave of Ashburn Manor at first light, content that justice and mercy have walked hand in hand through these halls. He tapped his cane gently, signaling the close. May your morrow dawn brighter than your past night, and may this affair remain a singular testament to the power of observation, the necessity of compassion, and the exquisite triumph of truth. With that, Poirot lifted his hat in a graceful salute. Captain Hastings offered his arm for the detective's departure, and together they strolled down the gallery's length, their footsteps echoing like soft applause. The portraits seemed to regard them with approval as they passed, and the crystal lamp's globe caught the last of the candlelight in a final, fleeting prism dot in the quiet that remained. Ashburn Manor exhaled, its secrets laid bare and its future unburdened. Outside, the moon slipped behind a cloud, leaving the night in gentle darkness, an apt finale for a story resolved by light.